Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto is now more determined than ever to become Hokage while restoring the Uzumaki clan to greatness. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto is now more determined than ever to become Hokage while restoring the Uzumaki clan to greatness. Maybe next time, Naruto, Haruka Yamino said as he sat beside his 8-year-old student Naruto Uzumaki, who was staring down at the bowl of miso ramen that was in front of him with a sad and dejected look on his face after the disappointing day the young boy had. Naruto Uzumaki is a young boy at the height of 4'4" who had spiky golden blonde hair with sapphire-like blue eyes. His skin tone was lightly tanned and on his cheeks he had delicate whisker-like marks. He was wearing an orange and blue shirt that had a blue hood on the back with blue shorts and black ninja sandals. To Haruka and those that cared about Naruto, he was simply Naruto Uzumaki, academy student and prankster of Konoha. To those in his class he was Naruto the loser, Naruto the orphan, Naruto the troublemaker. However, the older generation all saw Naruto as another name. He was Naruto Uzumaki, orphan and Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed demon fox. 8 years ago on October 10th, the nine-tailed fox appeared and attacked the village hidden in the leaves. The fourth Hokage, the leader of the village, fought valiantly against the beast before eventually he was forced to seal the tailed beast away into a newborn baby. That baby was none other than Naruto Uzumaki, who was only a few hours old when it happened. Naruto was left an orphan and with a giant burden to carry for the rest of his life. He was asked to be seen as a hero, and yet it never happened. The village stayed away from Naruto and made him an outcast. He would get glares from the villagers on a daily basis, and parents would even stop their children from playing with Naruto since they thought the fox would try to harm their children. Some of the market stores would not let him in, while others raised the prices greatly. Very few would actually let him in and be fair to him. "I guess so, Haruka-sensei," Naruto said back as he slowly picked up his chopstick and began eating his meal. The day was the day of the Genin exams, and despite Haruka telling Naruto that he was not ready to take the exams yet, Naruto went ahead with it anyway. The result: Naruto failed miserably. He could barely answer any of the questions on the exam that was given, his target practice was pretty abysmal, and he only managed to hit 2 of the 5 targets, his taijutsu was all over the place, and he could only do 2 of the 3 academy jutsu. Just like always, the Bunshin no Jutsu was Naruto's major weakness. No matter what the boy did, he just could not get the jutsu to work for him. The copies always came out looking half dead. Haruka didn't have any other choice but to fail him. Unfortunately, to make matters worse, Naruto was the only one out of all the people to take the exam who had failed, which of course broke his spirits even more. For the rest of that afternoon, Naruto simply sat on a swing that was in the back of the academy for hours sulking, as he had to listen to the parents of the students that did pass get congratulate and tell them how proud of them they were. If he had passed, Naruto had wondered who would congratulate him, since unlike the other he didn't have any parents. Would the Ichirakus come and tell him well done? Would Jiji have come all the way down from his office to say well done to him? Would Haruka? All these thoughts were swirling around in his head as Haruka and the Ichirakus saw his saddened looks. Their hearts went out to the young blonde since no one else would. "Naruto, look at me," Haruka asked Naruto, who stopped what he was doing and slowly looked up at Haruka. "Naruto, did you honestly study for the exam and practice the necessary passing grades?" he asked. Naruto nodded. "Of course I did. I tried and tried and tried, but I just can't get the hang of the damn clone jutsu," he said. "It's impossible." "And what about the other necessary parts of the exam? Did you read up on Konoha's history like you were required to?" "How can I when I can't even go into the library? The lady at the desk denies me access into the library, saying that nobody's allowed after day hours when clearly it's still open, but I can't do anything about, so how can I study when the books are in a place I'm not even allowed in?" Haruka frowned at this. As an academy student, Naruto had every right to use the public library. Even if he wasn't, he should still be allowed to go in. It's called a public library for a reason, and you really could not disallow someone from going in without a very good reason. "Well, despite that, Naruto, this just shows that you don't listen in class. Every time I see you in class you are either goofing off or have disappeared pulling pranks on people." Naruto waved his hands over his head shouting. "But people like my pranks, even you said you liked them." "Yes, I did say I like them, Naruto, but you do it so often and to so many people it gets people irritated and angry at you. And then when you get caught it's always the class that has to suffer, isn't it?" Haruka said, causing Naruto to gaze back down at his ramen. Whenever Naruto did a prank and Haruka catches him, it always made the class have to do a pop quiz or have to perform one of the required jutsu. He acted like he didn't care about the thing the other students would say to him and would talk back to them, but secretly it did. He just hated people not caring about him and always glaring at him. He just wanted some attention for once, and he didn't care whether it was good or bad attention. "Naruto, are you serious with wanting to be a shinobi?" Iruka asked, getting a surprised look from Naruto. Of course Iruka-sensei, I have to be a shinobi if I want to be the Hokage. To be the greatest of all the Hokages, that is my dream. You realize that becoming Hokage will not be easy, Naruto. If you want to be Hokage you have to work your butt off. You train and practice until you can't get up anymore. And then you do it all over again the next day. Do you think the other Hokages, like the third Hokage, was just given the title of Hokage? Naruto shook his head. He knew that his Jai-san, despite being old, was very powerful. He was the strongest person Naruto knew and was one of the few Naruto could actually turn to for help. Then if you are serious with wanting to be the Hokage one day, you have to start taking the academy seriously. But it's very boring, Iruka-sensei. It doesn't matter if it is boring, Naruto. The lectures and all the talking is to help you all realize what being a shinobi means and what you can expect when you do become shinobi. You need to learn your own village's history. Can you even tell me who founded the village, he asked. Naruto said as he made a thinking pose with his face. It was the tree guy, right? And the guy with the funny red eyes. Iruka's eyebrow twitched as he face-palmed a little as AM, who was obviously listening to their conversation, gave a small giggle at the description. Those are the right people, but in the exam you can't write the tree guy and the guy with red eyes, Naruto. You have to learn their real names. Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha is the answer you are looking for. Oh well, I was close, Naruto said, grinning. Yes, but close doesn't cut it, Naruto. You need to know these things. Naruto sighed and turned back to his bowl of ramen. He knew Iruka was right, but it was just so hard. How could he pay attention when most of the teachers hated him? It was only Iruka that actually wanted to help Naruto and help him succeed. Most of the time it really did feel like it was Naruto versus the whole world. Naruto, AM said, pitching in as Naruto turned his attention to her as Iruka took a few bites from his bowl of ramen. Iruka is not telling you this to make fun of you or to make you sad. He is telling you this because he wants to help you succeed, right? She said, getting a nod from Iruka. He wants you to succeed just like I and Tusan want you to succeed. But if you don't put all your effort into it and give it 100%, then you're not only letting yourself down, but also those who are helping too. Really? Naruto asked, getting a nod from AM. Now it's okay to goof off from time to time and to have fun. Everyone needs to let loose a little from time to time. But if you are as serious as you say about wanting to become Hokage, then you need to start pulling your act together. You need to start paying attention in class, you need to do the work that is given to you, and you need to follow Iruka's instructions, she said, speaking in a very big sister-like tone. Naruto was silent as AM gently ruffled his hair, getting a small smile from the boy as AM went back to ramen making. So Naruto, will you continue the academy next year? Iruka asked, since the academy year was over for the next 4 months, as Naruto. You know, a lot of the heirs from the clans around Konoha will be coming next year. They will be your age, so you will probably find yourself in their class with me. Naruto just listened. The Hokage had told that one could either start the academy at 6 or at 8, and Naruto, being impatient, went as soon as he turned 6. However, he now realized that through all the time that he should have been working and paying attention to Iruka's lectures, instead he was goofing off. The clans. Naruto thought about what Iruka had just said. He knew that there were different clans around the village. The only ones really knew about was the Hyuga clan and the Uchiha clan, because he remembered that they were the clans with the really weird eyes. He also knew that those from clans always graduated from the academy since they were trained at a much earlier age and at least knew the concept of shinobi skills. Plus the clans all had their own jutsu or techniques that only they could do. But Naruto was an orphan. No family to teach about how to be a shinobi. No clan to fall back on and be looked after and treated like royalty. No special techniques. To everyone else, Naruto was just another no-named orphan trying to make it as a shinobi. Naruto, you in there? Iruka said, bringing Naruto out of his thoughts as the older man was waving a hand in front of him. You alright there, Naruto? You zoned out there for a few minutes. Oh sorry sensei, my mind was elsewhere, he said, scratching the back of his head. What did you say before? I asked whether you will be joining us again next year at the academy, since there are a lot of the heirs from Konoha's clans will be joining. Naruto thought for a second before he answered, I want to, but I don't know whether I should. I might just embarrass myself again, he said, getting a frown make its way to Iruka's face. It was not often you saw Naruto Uzumaki in a somber kind of mood. I really want to be a shinobi, but I just don't know where to begin, and with the heirs of Konoha's clans being in it, I know it's going to be tough. Iruka mentally sighed. He knew that with so many children coming in from shinobi families, it will be tough for Naruto to stay on the same level with them. You shouldn't give up just because of some competition, Naruto, Tucci said as he too was listening in to Naruto's conversation. It was not often he saw his favorite customer act so down and glum. Even his ramen was able to fix it most of the time, but today's failure had obviously gotten to Naruto. If you want something, you have to work hard in order to get it. You can't be expected to work half-assed all the time and then just get what you want handed to you on a plate. When you work hard to achieve something, then when you get it the feeling will be one of great pride and happiness. I always wanted to own my own ramen stand and I knew I had to work hard in order to do it. I slaved in the kitchen for months to get recipes done right and had to save up money in order to start it. And look where I am now. I'm the owner of Konoha's most successful ramen stand that has been going on for 20 years strong. Really, old man? Naruto asked, getting a nod from Tucci. Naruto looked at the people around him to see they were smiling at him before he jumped up from his seat and stood on it. Then from now on I promise I will work hard and train so that one day I can become a fine shinobi and become the greatest Hokage this village has ever known. They all smiled. Their little Naruto was back. Although, Naruto said, getting the others' attention. I'm going to need a lot of help. I can't do it on my own, he said as Iruka stood up from his seat and stood behind Naruto and placed his hands on his shoulders. And you won't be alone, Naruto. Tell you what, since the academy is finished for the next few months I will have some free time now. When I can I'll stop over to your apartment and I will help tutor you. I will have to run it by the Hokage, but I'm sure we can come to some agreement. You mean it, Iruka-sensei? Naruto asked, getting a nod from Iruka. Tomorrow you and I will head down to the library and we will get you some books to study from. But they don't let me into the library. They will if I am with you, Naruto. Thanks, Iruka-sensei, Naruto said as the older man ruffled his hair. The two then went back to their ramen with smiles on their faces. Later on that evening, Naruto walked down the streets of Konoha at a steady pace with his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground in front of them. The street was pretty empty other than a few people heading home from work or going out to enjoy Konoha's nightlife. He kept his eyes on the ground so that he didn't have to see the glares that the people shot at him. He knew if he looked up all he would see was frowns, angry faces and looks of disgust. He didn't understand why everyone hated him and always nicknamed him the monster, demon, freak, murderer and more. He didn't remember doing something like that to anyone. Other than his pranks, he did not know what he did that caused everyone to hate him. The villagers were the ones that mostly threw glares and harsh words at him. Since the civilians controlled most of the shops and markets in Konoha, it was all but impossible for him to buy food, clothes, etc. Most times he had to rely on the Hokage to either do it for him or to accompany him. The civilian wouldn't dare insult Naruto with the age-old Hokage around, since everyone knew he had a soft spot for Naruto. The shinobi of the village were varied. There were a few that hated him and would have liked nothing more than to blast him away with a jutsu. But the rest were just kind of neutral to Naruto. They didn't bother him and just kind of stayed clear of him. The only time shinobi had been openly hostile to Naruto was on one of the annual fox hunt, as the villagers liked to call it. Naruto was 6 at the time, and when he had been cornered by the mob of angry civilians, two Chunin-level shinobi took their chance and attacked him. One hit him with a fire jutsu, while another threw shuriken at him. He was not sure how he managed to survive when he woke up the next morning to see the familiar age-old face of the Hokage looking down at him. When he asked, he saw Hokage flinch a little before he just told him that Naruto has always been a quick healer and that Konoha just has some of the best doctors and healers around. He felt like the Hokage was lying to him, but he didn't push it. The Hokage then told him that the two Chunin had been taken care of by one of his Anbus, while the civilians were taken to the T&I sector. Naruto never really understood what the T&I stood for meant, but he had a feeling it was bad and that you did not want to go through it. Ever since then there were no more fox hunts, but it didn't stop the glares or the names. Verbal beatings were just as bad as physical beatings in Naruto's mind. After a few minutes Naruto arrived at his apartment building. The place was not in the best condition, but it was definitely livable. Plus it had been Naruto's home for the last 3 years, so he grew to like the place. The building was easily livable for about 100 people or more and had faded orangey red tiles and creamy colored walls. Naruto walked up the steps of the apartment complex until he got to his own apartment on the top floor, which he was secretly happy about since it gave him a pretty good view of the village. As he walked up the steps he got a chill go down his back. The eerie silence from the stairway always creeped him out. Someone had once joked that a ghost roamed that stairwell. And if there was anything Naruto hated more than anything else, it was ghosts, not caring whether they were fictional or not. Soon enough he arrived at his apartment, which was right at the end of the hallway. Putting in his key, he turned it until he heard the click before opening the door, walking in and closing it behind him. His apartment was a pretty normal one-bedroom apartment. It had a small hallway, a living room, a built-in kitchen, a bathroom and then his bedroom. It was pretty bare since he didn't have all that much to decorate the place and he didn't have the money to do so. The only room that had anything in it was his room. In his room his bed was located in the middle of the room and up against the wall with orange duvets covering it with 2 pillows at the end. At the side of the room was his closet with all his clothes and then a small desk that just had kunai and shuriken scattered all over it. There were also a few posters hanging up, but they did not look like they would stay up for much longer. In all honesty, his whole apartment was in a bit of a mess. He had clothes scattered across the floor, old bowls lying on the sides. Dust began to collect on the side of the windowsill, along with small cobwebs in the corners of the room. Naruto stood in the middle of his apartment looking all around him. His conversation with Iruka had really woke him up. He really did want to be a great shinobi and be the Hokage one day, but with his attitude at the moment it was looking to be very impossible to do. A shinobi had to have strength, discipline, brains, and had to be prepared for anything. Looking around he rolled up his sleeves, went into his kitchen and got out some cleaning equipment. I may as well start somewhere, Naruto said aloud as he got going with cleaning his apartment. He spent the entire night doing cleaning his apartment, which left the people who lived below and around him wonder what on earth he was doing and why he was making so much noise. Eventually he fell exhaustedly on his bed, never realizing how tiresome cleaning an apartment could be, especially on an 8-year-old. He put his head on his pillow and quickly fell asleep, not bothering to change out of his clothes or take a shower. Next morning, Naruto woke up with a start as heard someone knocking at his apartment door. He looked over at his clock to see it read 10 a.m. Sitting up and stretching, Naruto stood up from his bed, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, as he walked out of his room and made his way to the front door. Opening it, he saw Iruka standing there looking at him expectantly and was looking him over. "Naruto, why are you still in the same clothes from last night?" he asked. "Sorry Iruka-sensei, I was up cleaning all night," he said as he stifled a yawn and let Iruka inside. When he got into the living room, Iruka was pleasantly surprised when he saw that Naruto's entire apartment was pretty much spotless. He could even still smell the bleach that Naruto had used. He saw a basket full of folded clothes that looked brand spanking new and was undoubtedly washed last night. Clean dishes on the dish rack. Even the high ceiling corners were clean and cobweb free. Iruka whistled in amazement. "Pretty good work, Naruto. What brought this on?" he said, getting a small shrug for Naruto, who was still half asleep. "Just thought if I'm going to be a great shinobi, I should have everything tidy and orderly. I'll be out in 15 minutes. I just need a quick shower," he said as he disappeared into the bathroom. 20 minutes later, Iruka and Naruto left Naruto's apartment and made their way towards the public library. Iruka had made sure to check in with the Hokage that it was okay to help Naruto a bit since the academy was over for the semester. Sarutobi just waved it off, telling Iruka that it was okay, and if Naruto needed a little added extra help, then he didn't see the harm in it. Since Iruka had told him how sad and disappointed Naruto was over failing the Genin exam, Sarutobi had sympathized for the boy since he knew how hard he had it despite his and a few others' best efforts. He also patted Iruka on the back for giving Naruto a good lecture and speech and was happy to hear that Naruto was going to take his shinobi, it training a lot more seriously now. So to make sure that Naruto could go into the library, he made sure to write a small letter to the head of the library to make sure she knew full well Naruto was allowed to be there just as much as everyone else. He gave the letter to Iruka in case he needed while taking Naruto. As the duo walked down the streets of Konoha, Naruto could feel the glares people were aiming at him and was avoiding their eyes. He moved a little closer to Iruka and felt a wave of comfort surge through him when he felt Iruka place his hand on Naruto's shoulder, signaling that Iruka would make sure nothing would happen to him. Naruto's head looked up a little to the side and saw the scowls and frowns that etched onto everyone's face. Though he did notice that the kids his age looked more confused. Like they were not sure why they should be glaring but were just copying their parents. It was not long before they arrived at the Konoha library. The building was a 3-story high building with different levels for the different type of books they had. Naruto had only been in a few times, but during those times it was because he managed to sneak in. Though it always ended with him being thrown out. They walked inside and made their way past the checkout desk where the head librarian was stationed. She was a middle-aged woman with dark brown hair and brown eyes. She wore simple civilian clothes but had a small badge on the left side of her top, signaling that she worked at the library. Her gaze glanced over towards Naruto and Iruka and she scowled when she saw Naruto. She stood up from her seat and pointed at him. "I have told you before, boy, that you are not allowed to be in here. Get out this instant," she said as Iruka stood in front of Naruto and looked her square in the face. "He has every right to be in here just as much as I do," Iruka said. "No, I will not allow that," as she stopped when she saw Iruka throw his hand over her mouth. "Unless you want to break the law and lose your life, I suggest you do not call him that," Iruka said, making her think twice before she said anything. Iruka then dug his hands into his pocket and gave her the letter from the Hokage. She read it over and scowled a little, but she knew it was real since it had the Hokage's seal at the bottom along with his signature. She cast her gaze back at Naruto and gave him a small glare. "I will be keeping a very close eye on you, boy," she said before she gave the letter back to Iruka. Iruka simply nodded before he motioned for Naruto to follow him. Naruto walked past, doing his best to ignore the glare the woman sent him before he fell into line next to Iruka and followed him. As they walked, Naruto could not help but be amazed at all the books that were there. He might not have been a great fan of reading, but when something interested him he was more than happy to read about it. There were signs of the different genres on the side of the bookcases ranging from romance, dramas, mysteries, etc. However, they kept walking and went up one flight of stairs before Iruka stopped them at one of the large bookcases. Naruto read the sign and saw it said Shinobi Archives. "Okay Naruto," Iruka started. "Everything that you need to know to help you become a capable shinobi is down this aisle. The range from chakra control, the history of this and other villages, different weapons, different strategies, all kind really. You will be amazed at the things that you can learn from these books." Iruka walked over to the bookshelves and began scanning the books for a few minutes. During that time he took out 2 books and handed them to Naruto. "Okay, these are the 2 we will have you start off on," he said as Naruto looked at the 2 books he had been given. The books were Chakra Basics and History of Konoha. "We will start with these 2. The first will help you with your chakra control and will have a few exercises for you to do in order to get better control of your chakra and to increase your chakra reserves," he said as Naruto just nodded along taking in what he was saying. "The other will teach you all you need to know about the history of our village. This information will help with future tests," he said giving Naruto a wink which made the boy smile. "It should have some details about the previous wars, how Konoha was founded, our village's allies and all sorts. It will help. Come on, let's go take a seat and look them over." Naruto nodded and the 2 went over to the nearest table. They opened Chakra Basics and Naruto slowly read while Iruka helped him along. Chakra is the mixture between spiritual energy and the body's physical energy. It is essential to every jutsu technique that has and ever will be created. Once molded, it can be channeled through the chakra circulatory system, which is to chakra as the regular circulatory system is to blood, to any of the 361 chakra points in the body. Through various methods, the most common of which is hand seals. Hand seals perform many ninjutsu, jinjutsu, and other secret arts other than taijutsu. The exact amount of chakra necessary to perform a simple technique is manipulated through hand seals. This will vary between the simplest of jutsus to the most dynamic and most powerful. The hand seals are bird, boar, dog, dragon, ox, tiger, serpent, rat, horse, monkey, hare and ram. Naruto took it all in as his eyes scanned the pages. "The hand seals are most important, Naruto. When you go home later today I want you to practice and memorize each hand seal. Trust me when I see knowing your hand seals off by heart will be greatly appreciated later on." "Okay Iruka-sensei. Could you show me them?" he asked with Iruka nodding. So Iruka went through the hand seals despite them being in the book already. But having a practical approach could help just as much as reading could. Naruto paid close attention the hand seals that Iruka made and did his best to memorize them. "Can people use jutsu without hand seals?" Naruto asked. Iruka thought for a second before answering. "Well, sometimes there are some techniques that can be used without hand signs, but to do that, the shinobi would have to have mastered that jutsu to such a level that he or she has complete mastery over it." Iruka stayed with Naruto for another hour before he had to go and fulfill some of his shinobi duties. He told Naruto he had border duty for the next few days and would not be back by the end of the week. He told Naruto he could take those books out, but to make sure to check them out with a lady at the front desk. Naruto nodded and gave Iruka a quick hug before Iruka left, thus leaving Naruto sat at the table reading the books. He spent the next 2 hours just sitting at the desk reading more about chakra and surprised himself when he actually found it interesting. He found some exercises that he could practice, such as the leaf exercise where the user had to levitate a lead in the air on one of his fingers using his chakra. The better control, the more leaves he could use. There were a few more exercises that he read about before he left them to read for another time, before he closes the Chakra Basics book and opened the History of Konoha book. He began to flick through the book before he found a good place to start and began to read. Before the ninja villages came into being, ninja were organized into small mercenary clans that knew nothing but battle. But after countless bloodshed, the 2 strongest ninja clans, the Senju clan and the Uchiha clan, entered a truce. Afterwards, the 2 clans would be the foundation that helped form the first shinobi village. Konohagakure. Hashirama Senju, the leader of the Senju, used his wood release abilities to produce much of the village's infrastructure and even part of the surrounding forest. When Konohagakure was created, many other clans located with the Land of Fire slowly began to join and make Konoha their home. Such examples are the Hyuga, Inuzuka, Yamanaka, Akimichi, Nara, Aburam, Kurama etc. Naruto recognized a few of the clan names and think he knew which ones they were. The Hyuga were the ones with the wide eyes and the Akimichi were the big people with really round bellies and swirls on their cheeks. Naruto had to giggle at the Akimichi clan. He had met one of the Akimichi clan members about a year ago. He was a big man with crazy, wild red hair that always seemed to be smiling. The few times that Naruto had seen him, the man were actually pretty nice to Naruto and he did not show any hate or disdain towards him. Naruto smiled at the memory before he continued to read. When he was done with the page he began flicking through the pages until he found something he found interesting. It was like that for a few minutes before he stopped himself at a certain page which interested him. Mainly because of its name. Uzumaki. What's this? Naruto thought as he saw the name. He had never heard of that place before from the academy. He had heard of the other 5 nation, but never this one. How come I have never heard Iruka-sensei talk about this place before, he thought before he began reading. Uzumaki was the shinobi village of the land of whirlpools. Uzumaki was known for having a long river run through its entire village, while the village had its own natural defenses being surrounded by hills and natural whirlpools surrounding the small nation. The people of Uzumaki were noted to have notoriously long lives, so it gained the epithet the village of longevity. Uzumaki was an allied nation and had close ties with Konohagakure due to Konoha's Senju clan being distantly related to the Uzu. Naruto froze mid-sentence and stopped reading as he stared at the book with wide eyes as his mouth fell open a little. The Uzumaki clan. But I thought I was the. Do I have a family? I don't understand. Where are they? Why am I not with them? He whispered as water began to gather in his eyes before he quickly wiped it away. Could that be where my mom and dad are? Not knowing what to do, Naruto did the only thing he could think of. I have to see Gigi, Naruto thought as he picked up the 2 books and ran through the library. He checked the 2 books out while ignoring the scowl on the librarian's face when she did it. As soon as she was done, he took off with the books in hand, ignoring the looks people were giving him, and ran straight to the Hokage Tower. Hokage Tower. Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed as he finished one pile of paperwork before he started on another batch. Damn it, I hate this paperwork. Kami, why do you curse me so, he thought. He wondered how the hell his predecessors and successor did it. They always seemed to finish their paperwork in record time, and for the life of him, he could not figure out how he did it. He wondered if the 4th Hokage used his Hiruzen to beat the paperwork by moving at light speed to finish everything in an instant. He was the current Hokage of the village and the nicknamed God of Shinobi and the Professor of Ninjutsu. He was old and he knew it. Hell, he knew that every morning when he woke up and felt his old bones and joints stiffen. He knew that when time that would not tire him out 10 years ago, now it left him taking deeper breaths. He knew he only really had a few years left in him being Hokage before it was time to find another successor. He just hoped the next one would not have their life end so tragically, just like the 4th Hokages did. While there were a few people he could consider taking over, a certain white-hair perverted Sannin and one mask-wearing Jonin coming to mind, and he knew they were not quite suited for the role of Hokage. Wait, you can't go in there, Sarutobi heard as he looked up from his desk at the sound of hearing his receptionist shouting. When his eyes left the paperwork on his desk, he saw one Naruto Uzumaki standing in front of him panting while holding a book in his hands. Dai-san, look, Naruto said, putting the book on the desk and opened it up to the page he was looking at before. Naruto, I'm very busy. You can't just. But Naruto pointed to the title of the page that made the 3rd Hokage sigh sadly. Uzumaki. I thought I would have had a few more years until Naruto would ask this, he thought as he put down his pen and lifted the young boy onto his lap. All Anbu, please leave, he said as he heard the faint sound of shushin sound out behind the walls and in the ceilings. Look, Gigi, look at this, Naruto said happily as he pointed to a certain point in the text. It says Uzumaki clan. I have a clan, Gigi. Isn't that great? Yes, that is great, Naruto, he said a little sadly, but wore a small smile on his face anyway. Despite the situation, it was nice to see Naruto wear a genuine smile on his face instead of the fake one he saw on his face most of the time. The book says they live just on the outskirts of Wave Country. It says in the book that's it near the land of fire. Can I go, Gigi? Maybe my mom and dad will be there, Naruto said as his eyes had a look of begging in them. How he wished he could, but the age-old Hokage knew that it was all but impossible. I'm sorry, Naruto, I'm afraid I cannot allow that, he said sadly, getting a confused look from Naruto. How come? You can send people with me if you're worried about safety and stuff. I'm afraid that's not the problem. Naruto, tell me, did you finish reading the page on Uzumaki clan, or did you head here as soon as you read the name of the clan? Or am I came right here, he said as Sarutobi took another deep sigh. He was not surprised at that. He knew when Naruto got excited very easily, and no doubt finding out about his clan would cause a wave of excitement to hit him. It's moments like this that never gets any easier, he thought. Naruto, the reason you can't go is simply because there is no Uzumaki to go back to, he said, getting wide eyes from Naruto. But the book says. I know, Naruto, Hiruzen said softly. Naruto, Uzumaki was destroyed during the Second Shinobi War a long time ago. The home of the Uzumaki clan is now nothing but ruins, he said as Naruto lowered his head. What about the Uzumaki clan? Where did they go? They are gone, Naruto. From what I understand, most of the Uzumakis died during the attack on their home by Iwa and Kumo. Those that did not fall in Yuzu's destruction were scattered all across the elemental nations. The only one I knew of were the ones that came to live in Konoha. But they have long since passed away. So does that mean they are all gone? Naruto asked as tears began to well up in his eyes as the hopes of finally having a family were dashed. Yes, Naruto. As far as I am aware, you are the last of the Uzumaki clan. Naruto didn't have to say anything as he dug his head into Hiruzen's chest and cried softly as the Hokage gently rubbed his back in comfort and brought him in for a comforting hug. "It's okay, Naruto, it's okay," the Hokage reassured as Naruto continued to sob. "They're all gone," Naruto thought. "I only just found out about them, but just like that they were taken away again." After a few more minutes Naruto's sobs slowly stopped, but his eyes were red and puffy, and he sniffled a little. The Hokage gave him a tissue to blow his nose with. "So was my mom or dad in Uzumaki then?" Naruto asked Sarutobi as the old man nodded. "Your mother was in Uzumaki. One of the few I have ever met and along with being one of the strongest people I ever knew." "What was her name?" Naruto asked, wanting to finally know the name of his mom. "I'm sorry, Naruto, but I cannot tell you. At least I can't until you're older." But Naruto started before he was quickly interrupted by Hiruzen. "You have to understand, Naruto, that both your mother and father were very powerful people in their own right. And because of that they made very powerful enemies, both inside and outside the village. If word to their enemies got out that they had a son, then you would no doubt have to suffer long-term assassination attempts. So they were really badass then and really strong shinobi." Hiruzen chuckled. "Yes, Naruto, they were badass. Very badass and very strong shinobi." "Cool," Naruto thought. Despite not knowing their names or what they looked like, he at least now knew that they were both shinobi, they were both strong, and his mother was in Uzumaki. "So how do you feel about this?" Hiruzen asked and Naruto thought about it. "I'm sad that they're gone, but at least I know that I had a clan and they were strong, right?" he asked, getting a nod from Hiruzen. "They were very strong, Naruto. But what they were strongest at was Kenjutsu and Fuinjutsu. In those two areas they were unbeatable. Very few people could match them." "Well then I'm going to make them all proud," Naruto proclaimed as jumped out of the Hokage's lap. "I'm going to be Hokage one day, Jiji, but that's not all. Now I have a second dream that I will accomplish." "Oh, and what's that then, Naruto?" Hiruzen asked, thought he had a good guess at what it was going to be. Naruto grinned brightly before lifting his arms in the air and shout to bring back the Uzumaki clan and show the world the Uzumakis are still here. Grass country. Walking along a deserted hallway barely lit up by some small torches, two on the side of the walls, a tall man with long wild white hair tied in a ponytail at the back and had black eyes with red lines running down his cheeks. He was wearing a green short shirt, kimono and matching pants, under which he wore mesh armor that showed out of the sleeves and legs of his outfit. His outfit was completed with hand guards, a simple black belt. On his feet he wore wooden sandals with a red haori over the green shirt. On his head was forehead protector with a kanji for oil. This man was none other than Konoha's Toad Sage Jiraiya of the Sannin. As he walked down the dark corridors he looked to each side to see cages and prison cells all containing people in them. However, by the looks of them all they looked like they had been dead for a few days. "Orochimaru," he growled out looking at the bodies. "What kind of monster have you become?" Jiraiya of course was referring to his once friend, rival and comrade Orochimaru of the Sannin. The man that went from being one of Konoha's most prized shinobi into one of the world's leading S-class criminals. For the last 10 years Jiraiya pursued Orochimaru and attempted to stop him at every turn, but Orochimaru was a snake for a reason. He kept finding ways around Jiraiya and kept giving him the slip. He was literally slipping from his fingers and it annoyed him. But Jiraiya had many contacts due to his elusive yet nationwide spy system and learned that Orochimaru had set up bases all around the elemental nations. He even discovered that Orochimaru had set up his own hidden village in the Rice country which he named Atagakur. Somehow Orochimaru had convinced the daimyo of Rice country to allow him to set up his own village there. He did not know how he did it, but he knew Orochimaru had ways of persuading people. No doubt telling the daimyo he would bring power and prosperity to his small country. Orochimaru had always been a good liar and even a smooth talker. He managed to deceive Jiraiya and the Leaf for years on end. He was currently walking down the hallways of a small base the Toad Sage had caught wind of from one of his spies. It was well hidden in the forests between many of Grass Country's hills. Jiraiya almost ended up walking past it multiple times. Jiraiya's footsteps echoed down the hallway. He knew Orochimaru was long gone from this base and most likely had not been here in months. He probably left it in charge with one of the shinobi he corrupted and said would make them strong. As he walked down the empty halls leaving the prison cells behind, his thought went to the young boy that currently resided in Konoha. Naruto Uzumaki. The boy was his godson by legal right and he wanted to take care of him. He was also one of the only few who knew of Naruto's parentage and inheritance. He got monthly updates from his sensei the third Hokage and knew Naruto had it rough, but he knew Naruto could pull through it. He was in Uzumaki and if he was anything like his mother then he would be fine. It was even Jiraiya who gave Naruto his first present for his birthday. He left him a little toad wallet on Naruto's bed. He hoped the boy used it since it was not easy for him to get. It took him weeks to convince Ma to make it for him. Even then the grumpy old toad would always complain. He stopped moving and looked to his right. There were a series of doors down the corridor and it looked more promising than just continuing to walk forward. For the next 10 minutes Jiraiya went in each room and examined its contents. Some were empty, some had notes about previous experiments that Orochimaru had performed on people, while others had the corpses of the unfortunate souls who were most likely forced to be experimented on. He looked over the notes of the experiments and found Orochimaru had been attempted to implant bloodlines into people. No doubt trying to use it strengthen himself and to help with his finding of becoming immortal. He eventually got to the last room at the end of the corridor and stepped inside. The room was barely lit, there was only a candle on a small desk that was stationed next to a bed which was the only things in the rooms. He could see a figure lying on the bed with the covers up to their neck and with their hands to their sides. The figure was looked to be wearing some sort of pale cream robe. When he got closer he saw the young figure was of a girl, about the age of 7 or 8. She had red hair that went just down to her shoulders and had creamy colored skin. She had an IV drip attached to her left arm. It was the hair though that had captured Jiraiya's attention. He had only seen that shade of red on one person before. He was not sure whether she was one of them, but it was quite likely. Jiraiya looked to his right and saw on the small desk was a clipboard with notable scribbles and writing on it. He picked it up and held it next to the candlelight. He began examining it and saw her blood type, her height and age, which he was correct since it says she was 8 years of age. It said she was here for observation and had not been tampered with or experimented on, to Jiraiya's relief. However, when he got to the name his eyes went wide and almost made him drop the clipboard. "I never thought I would find this," Jiraiya muttered as he looked at the girl before looking back at her name. Mainly her last name, Uzumaki. Naruto grinned as he opened his eyes staring at the ceiling before he jumped out of his bed and quickly got washed, dressed and ate breakfast before he headed towards the door. He took with him his pouch of kunai and shuriken with him and placed it on the side of his waist. The equipment might not have been in the best condition and was a little old, but it worked just like it was supposed to. Once he was out of his apartment he locked his apartment door before he broke into a run as he headed out for his day's training just like he'd done the past few days. He ignored the stares and glares he got from the villagers and simply focused on his day of training ahead of him. Many of the villagers had wondered why Naruto had been so keen and happy the past few days, but they thought nothing of it and just continued to ignore him like before. It had been 4 days since Naruto had spoken with the third Hokage and discovered his clan heritage. Since then he has dedicated the past 2 days learning what he could about his clan. The Uzumaki clan. From what he read, they were distant cousins from one of the most important clans in Konoha, the Senju clan. The first and second Hokage were both Senjus and in a way they were linked to Naruto. Not much by the second Hokage, but defiantly the first since Naruto had found out his wife was a member of the Uzumaki clan. Mito Uzumaki. The books did not have much about her, except that she married the first Hokage Hashirama Senju when she was 20 and helped him establish the Leaf Village with the other members of the Senju clan and the Uchiha clan. So he went to the third Hokage and asked him a few things about her. The third was happy to tell him about Mito since she played a large role in shaping Konoha and had known her before she passed away. Flashback, Naruto was once again back at Ichiraku's as he sat with Hiruzen to his left, who was happily enjoying his time out of the office. As much as he loved being Hokage, being stuck in a stingy office where it easily got stuffy in. Well, that and he hated all the damn paperwork. Since his conversation with Naruto he was very proud to see Naruto learning as much as he could about his Uzumaki heritage. Although it was very limited since the information on the Uzumaki was kind of scarce. Most of the information on them was in history books, but even then that was not much. So what was she like, Gigi? Naruto asked as Hiruzen slurped his noodles at Ichiraku's. He was not sure how Naruto did it, but somehow he managed to find a way to get him to take Naruto to his favorite ramen stand. He blamed it on old age. Well, Hiruzen stared as he finished his mouthful. Well, for one, she was very beautiful, Naruto, and was one of the most beautiful women in Konoha. She had the classic Uzumaki red hair and was very polite but also very strict. She was all about order and manners and making sure everyone was at 100%. Thought she had the Uzumaki temper, let me tell you, Hiruzen said as he felt a chill go down his back. Naruto grinned. Her temper sounded a lot like his. He wondered if all Uzumakis had a temper. What about as a shinobi? I bet she was strong, right? He asked as Hiruzen thought for a moment. Now that was actually a good question. Hiruzen knew she was strong, but that was in Fuinjutsu. He had never actually seen her in an actual fight since she always refrained from fighting cause of her pacifist ways. Then again, she was married to the first Hokage, one of the most powerful men to come from Konoha, so Hiruzen doubted she needed to fight that often. Though if the beating she gave Hiruzen and his friend when they were rude or did something they should not have, then yeah, he would have to say she was pretty darn strong. She was very strong, Naruto. When it came to Fuinjutsu there was no one that could match her. When it came to Fuinjutsu there was no Uzumaki better than Mito Uzumaki. In the other areas I'm a little unsure of since I never really saw it. Mito had always refrained from fighting when she could, but I have no doubt that she was a very formidable warrior when she wanted to be. Whoa, Naruto thought as he thought of his Uzumaki descendant. She sounds amazing. I bet she could kick even your ass Gigi, Naruto said grinning while Hiruzen looked down and pouted. You have no idea, he muttered, and thankfully Naruto had not heard him. Do you have a picture of her? Naruto asked out of the blue getting a look of curiosity from Hiruzen. I think do somewhere, but why do you ask? Naruto shuffled around a little in his seat as Hiruzen looked at him. The Ichirakus also looked at him from the corners of their eyes as they continued to work. Well, it's just I don't know of any other Uzumakis except from Mito Uzumaki. So I wanted to have a picture of her, so I knew what she looked like, and so I had a picture of someone who was my family, which she is. That's what you're meant to do, right? Have picture of your family around your home. At least I think it is, he said playing with the bottom of his shirt. Hiruzen just looked at Naruto before a smile appeared on his face and nodded. Very well, Naruto. Since I know that it means a lot to you, then I will try my best. I should have one at home somewhere since I did know her when I was just a boy. You will have to give me a day to find it, but I'm sure it's possible. Naruto smiled. Thanks Gigi, he said before he went straight to his ramen and began devouring it. As he ate he did not see the proud smile on Hiruzen's face. I can see that you are dead set on bringing back your clan Naruto, he thought before he looked up at the sky. Mito-sama, are you watching this young boy? If you are, then help him with his dreams. He truly does contain the will of fire, and I know that if you could meet him, then you would care for the boy just as much as I do. Watch him as he brings the Uzumaki back to the world. He then went back to his ramen and enjoyed the afternoon with Naruto, even going so far to help him with his studies a little. After all, who better to help a shinobi in training than the Hokage himself? Then flashback, the Hokage stayed true to his promise to Naruto and just the next day visited Naruto and was impressed at how tidy he was keeping his apartment since he knew Naruto could be a bit of a slob from time to time. He presented Naruto with a picture of Mito Uzumaki as promised. When Naruto saw the picture he was entranced with the woman in the picture. She was very beautiful like Gigi said, and her hair was arranged in buns with hairpins in them and 3 clips in the front. On her head she wore a type of crown, at least that's what Naruto thought it was. He guessed it must have been some kind of Uzumaki heirloom or something. She had milky white skin with pupil-less light violet eyes and a strange red diamond-shaped symbol on her forehead. She was wearing a cream-colored high-collar robes with a green undershirt. Then weirdly she wore tags with kanji written on them in her hair diesels. The picture was of Mito sitting peacefully under a sakura tree, simply enjoying the day, which Naruto smiled out. So when he got the picture he put it on one of the small tables in the living room, placed a small flower pot with some flowers in there as a way of remembering his Uzumaki ancestors. He made sure to pray to it at least once a day. Since he was going to rebuild the Uzumaki clan he wanted to remember those that came before him. After 10 minutes of running he found himself at one of the spare training grounds that was in the Konoha forest. Iruka had told him that people rarely go to these training grounds, so Naruto pretty much had free rein to use it. That delighted Naruto since it meant no interruptions and he could just get on with it. He stopped in the middle of the training ground and pulled out a piece of paper from his left pocket. On it was a training schedule that Iruka had made him to try and improve for the next year. The first thing he had to do was run 5 laps around the training field. Then he would move on to 50 push-ups, 50 squats and 50 jumping jacks. Once that was complete he was to practice his chakra control by performing the leaf exercise and train to balance the leaves with just his chakra. He was to do that for about 2 hours before he practiced his aim with his shuriken and kunai. Iruka had said since he was only 8 this is what he would start out with, but after doing the routine for a few weeks, they would up the schedule and increase the workload. Iruka had also made sure that Naruto ate better and more healthily than only eating Ichiraku's ramen all the time. He had told Naruto that despite it being his favorite meal, it was not healthy to just eat ramen all the time. Thankfully AM and Tucci agreed with this and wrote down a few simple recipes that Naruto could do. While they had done that Iruka had gone out grocery shopping for Naruto since he was aware that the shop owners overpriced Naruto big time and cheated him out of most of the allowance the Hokage would give him. So every Monday Naruto would return home to find fresh groceries in the fridge as well as a few more simple recipes the Ichirakus would give him since he was their favorite customer. Naruto did a few stretches before he took off and did his laps around the training field, grinning all the while knowing that the more he worked and the more he trained, eventually it would all pay off and give him the rewards that he wanted. Hokage office. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat at his desk with his hands entwined together as he looked at his student Jiraiya in front of him. His former student just returned after months of being away and using his spies to keep track of his fallen student Orochimaru. The Snake Sennin had slowly began to form his own village from what Jiraiya had informed him, and thus far they were not doing anything that concerned him. Thought he knew that it would have to be closely watched. And what did you find in this hidden base? The Hokage asked as Jiraiya told him the details of the infiltration in Orochimaru hidden base in Grass Country. Although he dreaded the answers that he was about to get from Jiraiya since he knew of some of Orochimaru's sick deeds. Corpses, a lot of them, and some had no doubt been there a long while. A few weeks at best. My guess would be that Orochimaru has had his hand in experimenting again, trying to find his method to immortality, or simply experimenting for fun. Kami knows what goes through his head these days, and may he grant mercy to those that were victims in his sick goals. Hiruzen sighed and nodded. He wondered that too. He wondered where down the line it was that caused Orochimaru to turn on them and become such a psychopath, but every time he was drawing a blank. My guess is that he was trying to implant a bloodline like he did all those years ago. The one with the child with Mokuton, Jiraiya said as Hiruzen nodded. He knew what he was speaking of. When Orochimaru had taken 50 newborn babies and implanted the cells of the first Hokage into them all in hopes that they would all develop Mokuton. Of the 50 newborns, only one survived, and that one survivor was thankfully rescued by the Hokage and his forces and was now one of their best Chunin in the village. Though he had Mokuton, his skills with it was nowhere near as powerful as he first Hokage's. I found some notes on his research but nothing concrete. The base was no doubt abandoned some time before I got there. And the girl? Hiruzen asked, asking about the young red-haired girl Jiraiya had discovered and brought back to the village with him. He had shown Hiruzen the clipboard of info on her had found, and the age-old Hokage felt like having a heart attack when he saw the last name. The coincidence with Naruto discovering his heritage and then a new Uzumaki being discovered simply amazed him. I found her in a separate room away from the others. By the looks of her, I don't think she was experimented on, thank Kami, though we can only really be sure when she wakes up. I don't even want to think about what idea he has had for her. I was not sure of the name at first, but after seeing the hair I knew it had to be true. I have only seen that shade of red on one person before, so I know she was an Uzumaki. Looks like the leaf now has 2 Uzumakis, Hiruzen mused as he leaned back in his chair. That remind me, how is Naruto? The Gaki must be getting pretty big, Jiraiya said, grinning as the Hokage pulled out his crystal ball. When the image became clear, they saw Naruto practicing with his kunai and shuriken on one of the log posts. His aim needed a bit of improvement, but from what they could see he was doing pretty good for an 8-year-old. The little Gaki is really going at it. He still wants to be Hokage, I'm guessing. Jiraiya said, grinning like a madman. He does, though now he has 2 dreams and he seems more determined than ever to accomplish both of them. 2 dreams? Jiraiya asked, raising his eyebrows. What's the other one? Become Hokage is the one I am aware of, but what is the other one? Hiruzen grinned at him. To bring back the Uzumaki clan, he said, causing Jiraiya to unconsciously take a step back. He knows his heritage? Jiraiya asked, surprised at the revelation, but became confused when he saw Hiruzen shake his head. He knows part of it, he said, and saw the look on Jiraiya's face for him to elaborate. A few days ago Naruto unintentionally came across Uchiha in one of the ancient history books at the Konoha library. When he saw the part about the Uzumaki clan, he rushed over to me and asked whether he could go see them, since he finally found out he had a family. Hiruzen noticed the sad, downcast look appear on Jiraiya's face. He knew that having to tell Naruto they were all dead and that he was essentially the last would be tough to tell. After I explained, he has now become determined to bring back the Uzumaki clan, as well as become Hokage. Since the day I told him that, all he has done is study and train. Jiraiya nodded before he asked the big question. Does he know about his parents? No. Although it did come up and I did tell him that his mother was the Uzumaki of the 2, I told him the reason why he could not know just yet. At least now, until he became Chunin. He was a little sore about it at first, but he accepted it. Jiraiya agreed. As painful and cruel as it was to keep the knowledge of a child's parents from him, he knew it had to be done so that Naruto could be protected until the time to reveal his parentage became possible. Both knew that sometimes you had to be cruel in order to be kind. The kid may look like his father, but he has his mother's personality. Oh, I would not be too sure. Though there is definitely plenty of his mother in him, he has his father in him too. Naruto can surprise you. He is smarter than he lets on, and if people could just look past the fox and the energetic prankster, they would see that since he began training every day, he has just been soaking in the information like a sponge. I have kept an eye on him with my crystal ball here. He is making good way in his training. Already getting the hang of the leaf exercise to control his chakra better. Jiraiya just nodded as he leaned against the wall. Now came the question Hiruzen was waiting for. Do you want to tell Naruto about the girl, or do you think it is best he doesn't know about her yet? Jiraiya asked as the Hokage contemplated it and had a serious expression on his face. He knew there could be risks, but with this girl being an Uzumaki, Hiruzen knew Naruto could finally have someone to call a friend and someone to call family. Naruto had the will of fire in him, and if this girl came into his life, no doubt he would push himself to become stronger to protect her. In that way Hiruzen knew he was so much like his parents and his past clansmen. The precious people in life come first. We will tell him. This girl is an Uzumaki just like Naruto is, and therefore Naruto has a shot at actually having a member of his family. Plus she could be good for him. A good motivator and vice versa, Hiruzen said as Jiraiya nodded. What about the villagers? If she is seen with him, don't you think they might try something since Naruto is not exactly well liked? Hiruzen thought shook his head. They wouldn't dare. They haven't done anything but shun and ignore him. Right now all they really do is glare and whisper. If Naruto can stride forward and ignore them, I'm sure she will too since she is in Uzumaki, and we all know what their tempers are like, he said, making Jiraiya grin. There was nothing in the world that could protect you from the old Uzumaki temper. Jiraiya knew this from first-hand experience when he peeped on Kushina on one occasion when she was all grown up and he got a beating that would have killed him if Minato didn't restrain her and try calming her down before she kept dealing him his punishment. Plus I have a few of my most trusted Anbu watching over him. Since the shinobi of the leaf know the difference between a kunai and the scroll it's sealed into, they don't mind Naruto. They are just wary of him. Hiruzen clarified. Hiruzen called as an Anbu member appeared in front of him. Though her face was hidden behind a mask, the Anbu member in front of them was defiantly female and had long purple hair that stopped midway down her back. "Hi Hokage-sama," she said. "Please go and collect Naruto Uzumaki from training ground 17 and bring him to the hospital lobby where I shall be waiting for him," he said. The Kunoichi saluted before disappearing via Shunshin. "Will you be coming with me?" Hiruzen asked Jiraiya, but the Toad Sage shook his head. "Not today. I have a few contacts I need to catch up on and some research that needs to be done for my next book," he said while making a perverted giggle as the third Hokage looked at his former student with a sigh of disbelief. Jiraiya really would never change. "Jiraiya," the Toad Sennin stopped before turning to his former teacher. "You'll have to see Naruto sometime, you can't keep putting off your duties as his godfather forever," Hiruzen said seriously. Jiraiya froze for a moment before he regained his composure. "I know, but now's not the time for me to meet him yet." "Let him meet his new family member before I even think of seeing him," Jiraiya asked. Hiruzen nodded to Jiraiya, who disappeared out the window before Hiruzen got out of his chair and made his way to the hospital. He knew Jiraiya would have to face Naruto one day, and when he did he'd be in for some anger at not being around like he was supposed to. However, before he opened his door he turned to face the paperwork on his desk while giving it the evil eye. "One day I will find a way to beat you," he said to the stack of papers that seemed to mock him, saying, "No you won't, you'll never beat us." But Naruto panted a little as he took a big breath of air as he looked at the wooden post in front of him that had been littered with kunai and shuriken marks. He was a little rusty with his weapons, but now that he had a proper planning schedule, he could finally begin to practice it more and improve. They were not bad, but there was defiantly room for improvement. Some of the kunais and shuriken had been fairly accurate while some had been off target. Others were way off target. But he knew this was what training and practicing was for. To get better until it becomes second nature. His chakra control, which was abysmal a few days ago, was already beginning to show some signs of improvement. He could safely balance one of the leaves with his chakra for about 10 minutes, which for Naruto and his massive chakra reserves was quite an accomplishment. He wiped sweat of his brow before he approached the wooden post and took of all the embedded kunai and shuriken and laid them to the ground. He would have to give them a thorough wash when he got back to his apartment. After all, according to Iruka, as long as you look after your weapons and equipment, then they won't fail you. Naruto packed his equipment back into the ninja punched when an Anbu with a cat mask appeared before him. Naruto saw the Anbu and smiled before lunging at her with a hug. "Hat-chan," he said as he hugged the purple-haired Anbu, who let out a low chuckle as she patted his blonde hair. "Hello Naruto," she said as she looked at the area around him and noticed the wooden log that was looking a little worse for wear. "I see you have been training hard." Naruto nodded. "Of course. If I'm going to be Hokage and bring back my clan, then I have to be strong," he said with Kat smiling from behind her mask. She was one of Naruto's favorite Anbus that the Hokage would send to watch over him, and Naruto had quickly made a friendship with her. Though he didn't get to see her very often, he would always be happy when he did. Although he was annoyed that he had not seen her face yet. The same was for Kat. Unlike most of the other shinobi in the village who just avoided Naruto, she was happy to get to know him a little, and she enjoyed the younger blonde's company. It made her feel like she might be ready to be mother someday. She knew that if people could just see past the fox, they would see what a delightful and caring boy Naruto was. "The Hokage has asked that I take you to the hospital. He will meet you there," she said, getting a confused look appear on Naruto's face as he tilted his head a little, making him look very adorable. Kat had to use every force of willpower she had not to glomp him and hug him to death. "How come he wants to see me at the hospital?" Naruto asked. Kat shrugged a little. "I'm not sure, but I'm sure you will find out when you get there." "Oh okay," Naruto said. "Could we make a quick stop at my place so I can put my equipment away?" he asked. "Very well. We will make one detour," she said as she placed her hand on his shoulder before making them disappear in a swirl of leaves. Hospital. Naruto appeared in the lobby of the hospital with Kat, where they were greeted by the Hokage, who thanked Kat before he dismissed her. Nodding her head, she disappeared in a swirl of leaves again. "So what do you need, Gigi?" Naruto asked. Come follow me, Naruto. There is someone I think you should meet, he said, gesturing for Naruto to follow him. Naruto looked at Sarutobi before shrugging and walking in place beside him as they made their way through the hospital. As they walked down the hospitals, most of the nurses and doctors simply ignored Naruto and didn't look his way, either because they did not care that he was here or they just did not do anything because the Hokage was there beside him. Though there were a few that had enough courage to look and give him a glare before they were quickly silenced by Hiruzen, who gave them one of his own glares that quickly sent them on their way. It was like that most of the time Naruto was in the hospital, so Hiruzen had to have his own personal doctors who he knew he could trust to heal and help Naruto when Naruto made a trip here. Thankfully they did not have anything against him and treated him fairly and never tried anything while he was being healed, unlike a few of the nurse and doctors in the past. After a couple of flights of stairs and walking through a few hallways, the pair eventually stopped at room 7 on the 3rd floor. So what are we doing here, Gigi? I'm not here to get more shots, am I? Naruto said as he rubbed his left arm and began scanning for escape routes in case that was the reason. He didn't enjoy getting shots last time, and considering he ran away and they had to send the medical ninjas after him, where they used through the injections like kunais to give him to the shot, which was unbelievably painful, considering it hit him on the butt. No, Naruto, no shots. At least not today anyway, Hiruzen said, making Naruto sign in relief. So are we here to see someone then? Naruto asked with the Hokage nodding. Take a seat, Naruto, he said, gesturing the seats beside them. Now Naruto, I want you to listen to what I say and do not freak out. Just pay attention and then you may go into that room. Hiruzen warned. Naruto nodded again and listened intently to what Hiruzen was about to say. A couple of days ago one of my old students was doing some infiltration work in grass country where he stumbled on a base that had been recently abandoned. Inside he found an interesting individual. Someone that is connected to you in a way, he said, getting a confused look across Naruto's face as he clearly didn't follow what he was saying. When my student went into one of the rooms he found a young girl asleep. She is your age and has red hair. Naruto, the reason I'm telling you this is because after inspecting her and finding information about her, we have discovered that she is in Uzumaki. Naruto, who was patiently listening to Hiruzen, had his mouth drop open slightly while his eyes widened in surprise and shock. What? He asked, stuttering a little. But I thought you said I was the last. No, Naruto, I said that you were the only we knew about and therefore the only one we thought was alive. Remember, many Uzumaki were scattered all across the lands when Uzu was destroyed. My guess would be that this young girl's parents or parent escaped and later had her. Oh, okay, Naruto thought as the two just sat in silence for a moment as Naruto digested what he had just been told. Another Uzumaki. So she is in Uzumaki. Then does that mean I'm not all alone anymore? Gigi, what's her name and can I go in and see her? He asked. Her name is Karin from what we understand. That was on the documents when my student found her. She is awake, I believe, since I tried to talk to her a little while ago, but she has not said a word. Maybe since you're in Uzumaki and are the same age as her you could get her to speak. We just need to find out what she was doing in the place she was found in. Naruto nodded as he got up from his seat and went to the door. He got a nod of confidence from Hiruzen before he turned the door handle and went inside. Naruto stepped into the completely white room that he had been accustomed to over the years, though most hospital rooms just looked the same in his opinion. As he looked over to the bed he saw a girl his age sitting up on the bed wearing a hospital gown, looking down at her hands in front of her. He looked at her blood-red hair and noticed her eyes were even a light shade of red but was pupilless. Her hair went down just past her shoulders and noticed that while one side was straight, the other had a spikier look to it and her skin tone had a slight tan to it. Naruto had to fight back a blush when he saw her. She was cute in his eyes and by looking at her, Naruto couldn't help but make a small comparison to her and Mito. He wondered if this is what Mito Uzumaki looked like when she was their age. Naruto made his over to the bed at a slow pace and saw that her eyes slowly panned up towards him. When he did he could have sworn he saw a tiny tinge of pink appear in her cheeks, but he thought it was just a trick from the sunlight. Hi, Naruto said, shuffling around a little on the spot. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. It's nice to meet you. The girl's eyes widened a tiny bit when she heard his last name but didn't say anything. Why, you're Karin, right? He said, but still no words came out of Karin's mouth. Okay, this does not seem to be going anywhere, Naruto thought as Karin just looked at Naruto with a blank stare, almost as if she was studying him in a way. If you don't want to talk to me then I can go get Gigi if you like, Naruto thought a little sadly as he turned around. However, when he did he felt a small warm hand grasp around his arm and felt himself be brought back a little. He was surprised to see Karin behind him out of the bed and had her head on his back. Naruto couldn't help but blush. This was the first time a girl other than Am and Kat-chan, who was his own age, had ever made contact with him or even been this close to him before. Your chakra, she muttered, but Naruto could hear her as could Hiruzen, who had ears pressed against the doors and were both a little happy to finally hear her voice. Your chakra is so warm. It glows like the sun does. Naruto thought in confusion while Hiruzen creased his brow as he thought. His chakra is warm. Could she see his chakra or sense it somehow? Does she have some kind of sensor ability? Karin leaned in and hugged him, all the more reason why Naruto was trying to get his blush under control. It's so much nicer than that snake man's. His chakra was so bad it made me want to be sick, she whispered. Naruto turned around to look at her. What snake man? He asked, causing her to tense a little as she slowly unwrapped her hand from around him and laid back down on the bed. Naruto got a chair and scooted it close to her. I don't know his name, but he stayed in the shadows a lot. But all I saw was his pale white hands with golden eyes and strange purple markings around them. He found me and my mom in grass country and then hurt my mom because she wouldn't let him take me, she said as she sobbed a little, making Naruto scoot his chair a little closer to her. He said that they were going to experiment on me, try and figure out why my chakra is so special. What do you mean special? Naruto quietly asked, not understanding what she meant. Karin bit her lip as if she was deciding whether to tell him or not, but figured it was safe to tell him. Ever since I was little my chakra has been a bit more special than others. When people touch my chakra or if they, say, bite me, my chakra flows into them and heals them, no matter what the wound. I've only healed little things, so I don't know if it could heal big time wounds and stuff. Naruto nodded a little while Hiruzen was slightly amazed. Amazed that not only was this girl a strong sensor type, but her chakra could heal people. If Tsunade was here she'd no doubt have a field day with her, Hiruzen thought. I could hear him talking about experimenting on my chakra, wanting to find out what makes it so special, and if he could replicate it, she whispered. But then a few days later he and everyone else just suddenly left. I fell asleep afterwards and then I woke up here, she said with a few tears making their way out of her eyes. Naruto got out of his chair and got on the bed. He laid next to Karin and wrapped his fellow Uzumaki in a tight hug, which surprised her a little at first, but she quickly welcomed it. His warm presence just soothed her, and strangely enough she felt safe when he hugged her. It's okay now, he whispered as he rubbed her back. That snake man can't get you anymore. Plus I won't let him take my new friend away. I might not be strong right now, but I will be one day, and I will use my strength to protect you. Oh really? Karin asked as she looked up at Naruto, a little surprised by his declaration. Of course. It's promise of a lifetime, Karin-chan, he said with a bright smile. See-chan? She thought, wasn't sure that she had heard him right. Thank you Naruto-kun, she said, making Naruto smile brightly and felt a little surprised when she added kun to his name. That was well put Naruto, Hiruzen said as he stepped through the door, believing it was time to show him as he slowly strode over towards the bed where the two 8-year-olds were currently resting. Hey Gigi, Naruto said before he noticed Karin looked a little scared of Hiruzen and quickly rubbed her back since AM did that to him when he felt scared or nervous and it always helped him. He guessed it worked when Karin looked calmer but her eyes stayed on Hiruzen. It's nice to see the two of you have become friends. It's always nice to see two youngsters like yourself making new friends and being happy together, Hiruzen said as he sat in the seat Naruto was previously sitting in. My dear, do you think you could tell everything that you just told Naruto? He asked as Karin looked at Naruto as if asking if this guy could be trusted. Naruto nodded and she took a quick deep breath. She recounted what she had told Naruto to Hiruzen as Naruto squeezed her shoulder in comfort, which she was happy about, and despite only just meeting, Naruto was already quickly becoming someone Karin could turn to. Though Naruto was happy he was comforting his new friend, he did have to keep fighting back a blush when his hand touched her skin. Her skin was very smooth and he had never been so close to a girl his own age before. Hiruzen listened intently to her story and had to frown as she told him how the snake man had killed her mother before taking her away. He just could not fathom why his old student would take an innocent girl's mother away. He had truly fallen into the darkness and knew he would not ever come out of it. When she finished he gently put his hand on top of hers and gave her a kind and grandfatherly smile. First let me say I'm sorry for the loss of your mother, my dear. I know what it is like to lose a loved one. I would like to ask you what you plan on doing now that you are safe. He asked. I don't really know, she whispered. With my mom gone there is nothing there for me back in my old home and my dad died when I was a baby. Hiruzen spoke up as Naruto continued to listen. Well, if you like, my dear, you are welcome to stay in the Leaf Village. I can promise you that you will be safe here, he said, surprising both Naruto and Karin. I can? She asked hesitantly as the Hokage nodded. But where would I live? She asked since she did not like the thought of living on her own. She can stay with me, Naruto blurted out, catching both Hiruzen and Karin a little off guard. Alive with you? Karin asked as Naruto nodded. Could she really live with someone she has only just met? Yes, since I live on my own, I could always use the company. Plus my apartment is big enough for one more person to live in. We would have to share a bedroom, but the room can easily fit another bed in there. Does that sound alright to you, Gigi? Naruto asked as he looked at Hiruzen with hope in his eyes. Well, it would have to be Karin's decision, he said as he looked at Karin. Would you like to live with Naruto, Karin? If not, then we can easily get you an apartment in the village, he said, though he was more or less hoping she would want to stay with Naruto. Karin said as she looked at Naruto. She looked in his eyes and saw nothing but honesty and warmth from them. She knew she could trust him. I would like that, she said, getting a big smile from Naruto, who happily hugged her, while Hiruzen let a small smile appear on his face, happy at the decision she picked. Then I will get the papers for your citizenship in Konoha ready then, he said as he got up, went across the room towards the door. However, there is something else I must ask Karin. He asked, getting both Uzumaki's attention. I must ask you whether you would like to be a shinobi of the Leaf Village. The abilities you said you could so would make you a fine shinobi, if that is the route you would like to go down. A shinobi? Karin asked. I'm not sure, Hokage. I have never really thought about it. I can give you some time to think about it. The academy won't start for about 5 months, so you have the time to choose. I would like to think about it, she whispered, getting a nod from the Hokage. He could not force her to be a leaf ninja, but he secretly hoped she would. Not because of her skills, but he already had a feeling Naruto would do great things one day as a shinobi, and he got the same feeling from Karin. They were both Uzumakis after all. And everyone knew an Uzumaki was unpredictable. 2 days later, Naruto lay awake in his bed half asleep as the moon was high in the night sky, causing moonlight to shine through the windows, catching his attention. He stared up at the ceiling thinking about the last 2 days. He had gotten to know Karin a lot more during that time and found she was not just the shy, quiet girl he had first met. She could be quite energetic when she wanted to, could talk to him on almost any topic, and she had proven to have a bit of a temper at times. It made him laugh when she tried to bop one of the doctors when she thought he was trying to touch her chest, but stopped when he realized he was checking her heartbeat with a stethoscope. The Hokage had one of his female Anbu members get the things that Karin would require, like clothes, footwear, pajamas, and even a bed and a set of drawers for her, since he didn't think Naruto and Karin should share, and he did know that Naruto's bedroom was big enough for another bed. Naruto had initially blushed at the prospect of have Karin sleep in his room. Even though it was in a different bed, it was still a little unnerving, though Karin didn't see anything wrong with it. He had brought her to his apartment earlier this afternoon, and Karin had liked the place, saying it was homey and comfortable, which Naruto was happy about, since he wanted to make sure she felt safe and warm in her new home with him. As soon as she was settled in, he took her to Ichiraku's and introduced her to Am and Tucci, who both took an immediate liking to her. She and Am quickly started talking, and no doubt both were happy they now each had a girl they could go to talk to. Heck, even Am offered to teach us both how to cook recipes and stuff, Naruto thought before he heard a shuffling come from the bed beside his and felt a weight appear this bed. He turned his head and his eyes widened when he saw Karin had come over and got under the covers with him. Hey Karin, what are you doing? He said as his face resembled Karin's hair. Warm, she said in reference to both his body and chakra as her arm circled around Naruto and she put her head on his shoulder, making him go completely red once again. When he stared down at her, he saw she had fallen asleep immediately and her grips around him had gotten tighter. He tried to wriggle out of it, but it was to no avail. She was like a vice grip that wouldn't let go no matter what. He saw the peaceful expression on her face and merely sighed and closed his eyes. He figured he might as well get used to this kind of situation. Though he knew now that with Karin in his life, he was going to start working even harder so he could protect her. Whoever that snake man was, he would be damned if he let him take her away again. After all, Uzumaki stick together no matter what. 3 months later, on Karin-chan, Naruto called out as he ran along the pathway towards the usual training grounds that he trained at, with Karin right behind him trying to keep up. I'm coming, Naruto-kun, don't rush me, she answered back as Karin chased after him wearing a cream-colored shirt with a black skirt and black shinobi sandals. She ran after Naruto, who wore a cheeky grin on his face as he looked back at her. 3 months had passed since the day Karin had joined Konoha, and she very quickly adapted to her new home, and she and Naruto had very quickly taken a liking to each other. They very quickly became best friends. After she had snuck into his bed, it became a habit of Karin's to sneak into his bed during the night. Normally it was because she said she was cold and Naruto was so warm, as well as his chakra, but Naruto knew it was simply because Karin hated being alone and having Naruto next to her just warmed her heart and made her feel safe with him. It took Naruto over a month getting used to it, but he grew accustomed to having her next to him, and most of the time the two Uzumakis just shared the bed together. Though Naruto was happy that the village did not hate her for being his friend, as he did not want her to have to go through some of the things he had been through in the past. Though they did ignore Karin when she was with him, he was glad that when it was just her on her own, they treated her normally. It was something the Hokage was thankful for too, since he was worried about how they would treat her being with Naruto, but was happy when they didn't show her any hostility. The Hokage of course had to inform the council of Karin's arrival to the village, and many were excited at the prospect of having another Uzumaki in the village. Though Hiruzen didn't like the interested look the old war hawk Danzo had shown in her and quickly told him not to try anything against either Naruto or Karin. The topic of her special chakra abilities were the talk of the council, since her healing chakra and sensory abilities were much to be desired. They knew that if she were to pursue medical ninjutsu, she could very easily be able to reach Tsunade's level if she focused and pushed herself for it. The Uzumakis together showed them that the future was looking bright for the village, even though the civilian council despised Naruto and wanted him gone. Naruto too was happy that Karin decided to be a shinobi and would train with him. Her chakra control was a lot better than his though, but when it came to the more physical stuff Naruto was on top. "You ready for today, Karin-chan?" "I'm not going to go easy on you," Naruto said. His taijutsu had improved over the months thanks to the help of some crazy and hyperactive Jimnin of the village with a weird bowl haircut and who was wearing a green spandex suit. He was only able to help them for the one day, but he just helped fix Naruto and Karin with their taijutsu stances and helped them make their punches and kicks crisper and more powerful. Though he did recommend that eventually they find a taijutsu style that fit them, since the academy style was only good to a certain degree. Naruto and Karin both went to the library to try and research different taijutsu styles, but none of them seemed to fit them. The crazy Jonin had said that Naruto's type of hand-to-hand combat was more like a brawler, getting right up in the opponent's face and laying down the smack down on them. While Karin seemed to range more towards a flexibility type of style, using her legs and high kicks to her advantage and then using her arms for support. She had taken a keen interest in her clan after Naruto had told her everything he knew about the Uzumaki clan from reading the history books at the library and after seeing Naruto look so determined in reviving the clan she wanted to help. Even though Hiruzen had to wonder if the two would get together since it was not uncommon for two clansmen to marry one another. Many of the clans in Konoha like the Hyuga and Uchiha married people from their clan and if Naruto and Karin did fall in love, he knew it was not really incest since they were not siblings or cousins. They were only distantly related from what he could gather. "So what do you want to practice today?" "Aim, accuracy, chakra control, or sparring?" Naruto asked. Karin tapped her chin. How about we focus on aim and accuracy, along with a bit of chakra control to end the day." "I can nearly balance all 5 leaves on the tip of my fingers now," she said, making Naruto grumble a little since he was still struggling with 3 leaves, but he knew he was making progress and his chakra control was better than it was 3 months ago. "Now stop pouting. You will improve. You know what Iruka said. Girls are just better at chakra control than boys are. Plus do not forget you have enough chakra for 3 kg and then some. You're doing well considering," she said encouragingly. Naruto smiled. I guess that's true, he thought, thankful for Karin being here to cheer him up. The last 3 months really had been better than ever with her round. "Come on, we are nearly there," she said as they both ran towards their usual training ground. They laughed together as they ran nearer to the training grounds where they suddenly slowed down in pace when they heard a voice they did not recognize. "Kaiten. Gakakyu no Jutsu. Fire style. Fireball Jutsu." Both stopped in surprise when they saw a large torrent of flames engulf a part of the training field. Naruto and Karin had to shield their eyes a little from the heat that was coming from it. "I wonder who is doing that," they both thought as the fire eventually died down. When it was all gone they were surprised to see a boy their age wearing a dark blue shirt with black shorts and black sandals. He had black hair that was spiked up at the back and had black pupilless eyes. They moved closer and saw him panting a little as he tried to catch his breath. They were surprised to see someone their age performing a fire jutsu since they knew how taxing it would have to have been for someone of their age and they doubted he had much chakra to use due to their age. Everyone except them thought thanks to their Uzumaki heritage. Hi, Naruto said walking forward towards the boy catching him off guard but settled a little when he saw Naruto and Karin. "Hello," the boy answered back softly before a small awkward silence filled in as they all just stood there not too sure what to say. "That was pretty cool. I didn't know someone our age could do a fire jutsu like that," Naruto said getting a nod from Karin in agreement. Thanks, it's a rite of passage from my clan that I'm trying to perfect." "Rite of passage?" both Naruto and Karin asked so the boy explained. "In my clan we excel in Kaiten jutsu, so the Gakakyu no Jutsu has become a jutsu that everyone in the clan must learn. Those that perfect it will become a true part of the Uchiha clan," he said as he turned around to show them a fan-like red and white fan symbol on the back of his shirt. "You're part of the Uchiha clan, that's the clan with the red eyes, right?" Naruto asked as the boy nodded. "It's called the Sharingan. A bloodline my clan has. My name's Sasuke," the boy identified himself as. "I'm Naruto Uzumaki, it's nice to meet you," Naruto said politely. "I'm Karin Uzumaki," Karin spoke up. "Are you 2 siblings?" Sasuke asked since both had the same surname, but both shook their heads and it was Karin who answered. "No, we're both Uzumakis, but we are distantly related. We are both orphans." "Oh, sorry to hear that," Sasuke asked wincing a little, but both shrugged since they had gotten used to it by now. "So what are you here for?" Sasuke asked. It was Karin who answered. "We are actually here to train." "We have been coming to this training field for the past few months to practice," she said as she tucked a stand of hair behind her ear, making Naruto blush a little at the motion. "Training, you two want to be shinobi too?" he asked, getting a nod from both. "What kind of training do you do?" he asked. Naruto went into his pocket and showed Sasuke a timetable of what they usually do each day. Since today was Friday, it was the day where they chose what to do instead of having a plan like the other days. Sasuke looked at it a little impressed. If they are here to train, he thought that maybe he could train with them. That way he could test his strength and get stronger, since fighting tough opponents helped push shinobi forward. "So what were you going to do today?" he asked, looking at the two. "We were going to practice with our kunai and shuriken and then work on our chakra control. Would you like to train with us?" Karin piped up, getting odd looks from the two boys that stared at each other before they both surged. "Sure. I may as well. I was going to do it at home, but I can do it here too," Sasuke said before they walked together towards the training posts. They each lined up in front of a training post, each with kunai in their hands, before they all threw the kunais towards the posts. They kept it up in rapid succession since they needed to get used to quick kunai firing. Karin smiled as she saw her aim had improved. When she first tried it, the kunai slipped from her hand and flew towards Naruto and into his foot. That was not a fun day for Naruto, and she had to patch him up a few times with her chakra. When it came to her special chakra, she was glad that when Naruto bit her, since it was the only way she knew how to put her chakra into another person, he always bit in the same spot. The last thing she wanted was to be covered head to toe in bite marks. However, thanks to Naruto giving her a hand and from a few tips that Iruka had given them, her accuracy had improved. At least now all the kunai and shuriken hit the post. When she looked over at the two boys, she looked a little surprised before she face smiled. Naruto and Sasuke were going all out at throwing the kunai and shuriken, and every few seconds they would give each other a small glance before smiling and going back at it. As if they were observing each other's work and seeing who did better while trying to see how it was done and how they could improve. Are those two competing or studying each other? She thought to herself. Despite making a new friend, Naruto was also seemingly making it a small competition. Then again, he always did like to give his all and didn't like to fail or loss. This is going to be interesting, she thought, where she decided to just stop and watch the two go at it. He's not bad, Naruto thought as he threw his weapons towards the post. He's pretty good, Sasuke thought with just as much vigor. Eventually they ran out of weapons with all of their kunai and shuriken embedded in the posts, making it look like a wooden pin cushion. Both of them looked at their respective posts while counting how many shuriken were embedded into them. "I got 23 kunai on my target post," Naruto said gleefully, seeing he got almost all of them on target. "I also got 23 of my kunai on the post," Sasuke said, surprising each other as they each thought they did better than the other. "I guess you guys will have to call this one a draw," Karin said as she walked forward, seeing they were out of ammo to throw. "Oh no, no way, Karin-chan. A draw isn't accepted in the battlefield, so let's go again to decide the winner. You with me, Sasuke?" Naruto asked his opponent. Sasuke nodded, since he'd also like to see who will come out the victor in this training. So that's how it went for the next few hours. Naruto and Sasuke continued to try and outdo each other, which by the end of the day was beginning to get on Karin's nerves. They just kept training and training, which was kind of surprising since from what Karin saw of Sasuke, he looked to be a sweet and gentle boy, but Naruto seemed to have brought out some fighting spirit from inside him, which seemed to be what had him trying to keep going, despite the fact he was looking a little weary. While Naruto had managed to beat Sasuke when it came to kunai and shuriken accuracy, Sasuke had managed to beat Naruto when it came to the chakra control exercises. While Naruto was still stuck on 3 leaves and Karin still practicing with 5, Sasuke was able to control 4. Sasuke enjoyed rubbing it in, which always promoted a fight to break out between the two, which Karin had to keep putting a stop to. When it was 4 in the afternoon, they left the training field and the small group of children went their separate ways, with Naruto and Karin heading back to the apartment while Sasuke went to the Uchiha compound. The two boys gave each other another glance before parting ways, but as they left their eyes looked at one another and 2 tiny smiles appeared on their faces before walking off. The beginning of one of the greatest friendship rivalries Konoha would come to know. Karin had caught the smile they each gave and smiled as well, happy to see the boys actually acknowledged each other as friends and possible rivals. The Uchiha compound. Sasuke kicked of his sandals as he made his way through the hallways of the Uchiha compound. The compound was enough to fit over 100 Uchiha within it and had its own market stalls and shopping district. Their Konoha police force station was also located nearby, since his father was the currently commander of the police force and was mainly comprised of Uchiha clansmen anyway. He steadily walked towards the kitchen and went inside. When he did, he saw his father sitting at the table while his mother was preparing tonight's dinner. His father had short black hair that reached to his shoulders and onyx-colored eyes. He wore a simple kimono with gray pants which had the clan symbol on the back. He sat at the table in front of his father, who looked up and gave him a nod in acknowledgement, which Sasuke happily returned. His mother Makoto Uchiha turned around and jumped a little in surprise seeing her son. "Sasuke, I didn't even hear you come in," she said before frowning at his dirty clothes and the few cut marks that were on his arms and fingers. Makoto Uchiha was a very attractive fair-skinned woman with long, black hair, with bangs hanging on either side of her face to roughly frame her cheeks and black eyes. She wore a simple dark purple blouse with a red plum skirt and a light yellow apron over it. All in all, she was a woman with an earthly type of beauty. She looked at him sternly. "Did you ever do it again during your training, Sasuke?" she said, making Sasuke wince a little. His mother just had that effect on him that made him want to run for the hills when she was not pleased. "Put your arms out," she said as he pulled a small jar of medical cream, which made Sasuke roll his eyes at worrying his mom could be sometimes. "How is your training going?" Fugaku asked as Makoto put the cream on Sasuke's hands. It's going well, father. I can almost do the Gakakyu no Jutsu perfectly now, and I made 2 new friends today," he said, happily getting a surprised look from both adults. "You made friends? Well, that's great, sweetie," Makoto said, kissing her son's forehead, happy that he has 2 new friends since he didn't really have any his own age outside the clan. "Yeah, and we practiced with our kunai and shuriken first before practicing our chakra control. They have a whole schedule and everything they made, it looks all official and everything," he said with his mother and father nodding. "What are their names?" "You should have them over so we could meet them," Makoto said, since she was very eager to meet her youngest son's new friends. "Their names are Naruto and Karin Uzumaki," he said, which made both Fugaku and Makoto flinch a little, mainly at Naruto's name. However, it was for different reasons. "Kushina's boy," Makoto thought sadly as she snapped out of it a moment later. "The Kyuubi's Yinchkriki," Fugaku thought in a neutral expression as he wasn't sure how to take this revelation. "So what do you think of them? Are they nice?" Makoto asked with Sasuke shrugging. "They seem okay, though. I and Naruto were a bit competitive with each other and we kept trying to outdo each other. I think he might be my rival too," he said with some confusion, which made Makoto grin inwardly since to her that sounded so familiar. Fugaku just nodded. He didn't really mind Sasuke having friends, even if it was Naruto. It was not that he disliked the boy, it's just due to his status in the village he could not help but be wary around the boy and just simply left him alone. After all, the Kyuubi was the Bijuu that had the most incidents with Konoha, considering their ancestor Madara Uchiha used it to try and attack the village after fighting Hashirama, which thankfully failed with his defeat and death at the hands of the first Hokage. Then there was the last attack that had the Kyuubi attack Konoha and run wild in the village. That had truly been a dark day as many ninjas died, children became orphans, parts of the village were destroyed, and their hero the 4th Hokage was gone after sealing the Kyuubi in Naruto. While he didn't blame Naruto for anything, he did blame the demon inside him that was responsible for how his clan was now being treated. Because of the last Kyuubi attack, the Uchiha were suspected of being involved in it and were now under suspicion. The fact that we're now living in an isolated area in the village and being under surveillance was proof of that, and he hated it. He knew why they were suspected, since after all the Sharingan could possess the power to control the Kyuubi like Madara did during his battle against Hashirama, but his clan was innocent. He didn't know how or why Kyuubi attacked again, but he knew no one in his clan was responsible. However, despite that, the elders still suspected them and were constantly observing them. Makoto though did feel sympathy for the boy simply because his mother had been one of her best friends, and even though she wanted to watch over him like her friend would have wanted before she passed away, she had not done so, and it had made feel very guilty inside. "What about the other one, the one called Karin?" Makoto asked again. "She's nice and is quite skilled too. She isn't as good as me and Naruto in weapons throwing, but she's got even better chakra control than me, plus she has unusual red hair," Sasuke said in detail. "Well, that's not surprising, girls always were naturally better than boys when it come to chakra control. It's the physical stuff they need to work on to improving themselves," Makoto said a little gleefully at that fact. "So can they come over sometime?" Sasuke asked, wanting to know if his new friends could come see him at home, since it always felt a little lonely in here. "Well, as long as you don't slack off in your training then you can continue seeing your new friends," Fugaku said, making Sasuke grin widely. His father had been more open with him the past few weeks, which he was thankful for, and the relationship between father and son had become much better in his eyes. After his mother had finished putting the cream on his cuts, he got himself a drink before heading off to his room to rest. As he walked there, spotted his older brother Itachi. Just as he was about to call out to him, he disappeared via shunshin. "Big brother, what's wrong with you?" he mumbled before going into his room. Meanwhile in the kitchen, Makoto and Fugaku were both still in the same spots they had been in when Sasuke had left, thinking over what Sasuke had said to them. "Kushina Uzumaki. There is a name I have not heard in a long time," Makoto muttered as Fugaku nodded, knowing that the rambunctious redhead was once one of his wife's best friends and had known each other since they were in the academy. Makoto laughed a little. The way Sasuke described himself with Naruto sounds just like how we were when we were younger. Always competing and trying to outdo each other. "Do you miss her?" he asked as Makoto nodded. All the time, she said before returning to her cooking as Fugaku looked at the showing, a small hint of sadness on his face before looking away. Later that evening, Naruto sat on his bed as Karin was in the bathroom getting ready for bed as he read the book in front of him. Since he met Sasuke, who was part of the famed Uchiha clan, he had wanted to know all about the clan since they were after all one of the founding clans of Konoha. He was currently reading up on the Uchiha bloodline, the Sharingan, since apparently it was a very famous and powerful Kekkei Genkai. A Sharingan is the bloodline ability of those within the famed Uchiha clan of Konoha and is recognized as one of the most powerful Dijutsu Kekkei Genkais. The Sharingan eyes are red pupils that have a tomo around the pupil. The max number of tomo a Sharingan has is 3 tomo. Those with 3 tomo are considered to have a fully matured Sharingan. The Sharingan has the ability to copy any jutsu it sees that are not bloodline abilities by memorizing the hand seals that are performed. It can memorize ninjutsu, jinjutsu, and taijutsu with near-perfect accuracy, allowing the user to use the techniques as their own or even modify them to create their own new techniques. But other well-known abilities are the ability to see a person chakra flow and give the user perfect clarity and perception of an enemy's next move. Naruto whistled. Wow, now that's a bloodline, he thought. He had read that bloodlines were things only a certain family or people of certain blood could do, but the Sharingan has so far shown itself to be the most impressive one yet. I wonder if Sasuke has his Sharingan yet. I'll have to ask him next time I see him, he muttered to himself before he saw Karin come out in her pajamas, which consisted of a purple shirt and black shorts. Naruto put the book away. It's time for bed and I know you were reading that book again late last night, she said, putting her hands on her hips. When she did that, Naruto knew Karin meant business. Fine, it's going away, he said as he put the book on one of the side tables. Kami, she is so pushy. But she said as both got under the covers of the bed as Naruto turned the lights out. He settled down and stared up at the ceiling. After about an hour, Naruto once again found Karin snuggling into his bed, putting her head on his shoulder, making Naruto feel the usual swarm of butterflies in his stomach as she snuggled into him almost affectionately. Why does she even bother going into her bed when she keeps coming into mine to sleep in, he thought before he rested his head next to Karin's and let sleep claim him. 1 week later, take this, Naruto said as he threw his fist forward only for Sasuke to catch it in his palm and flip the blonde boy over. Naruto landed on his feet and traded a few punches with Sasuke and managed to dodge a swift punch that the Uchiha had thrown at him. Naruto reacted back and went for a roundhouse kick. The Uchiha managed to duck under the kick and swiftly moved his leg and managed to catch Naruto as he went down to the ground, which knocked him to the ground, with Sasuke appearing above him with his fist in front of his face. It looks like I win, Naruto, Sasuke said with a happy grin on his face. Oh, shut up, Sasuke, you just got lucky, Naruto said, pouting as Sasuke got off him but put a hand in front of him to help Naruto up. Naruto took it and was brought back to his feet. Karin was off to the side clapping a little at the display the two boys just showed. Sasuke had trained with them every day for the past week and even thought the friendship between them had grown. Sasuke and Naruto had beginning to become rivals as well as close friends. With Naruto and Sasuke competing with each other, both were improving in their skills by leaps and bounds as well as Karin. Naruto could only balance 4 leaves on his fingers tips while Sasuke could do 5. Karin though was now on 7 leaves, much to the two boys' annoyance and her delight. While Sasuke was better at ninjutsu and taijutsu due to his clan style and previous training he got from his parents, Naruto was proving to be pretty formidable to go against because of his large chakra reserves and crazy stamina that seemed endless. Since they became good friends, they told Sasuke about Karin's special chakra and her amazing sensory abilities that seemed to impress Sasuke. All in all, the three all excelled in different things and helped each other with the bits they needed improvements on. What shall we do now? I'm feeling a little out of it today, Karin said, since it was just one of those days where she just didn't want to train and instead just relax. I guess we could take a day's rest. We have been training for a week non-stop and Gigi said it's good to take a rest from time to time, he said, making both think before agreeing. They had earned a rest and besides they were still only 8 years old after all. They left the training ground once again just like they had done for the past week, but this time Sasuke invited them over to the Uchiha clan compound for lunch since his mom had said she wanted to meet his new friends, so he figured why not getting it out of the way now. As they walked, Sasuke couldn't help but notice that some of the villagers were glaring at Naruto while they looked just indifferent to Karin. Why are they glaring? Sasuke thought but saw Naruto was simply ignoring them, though he did spot the small hint of sadness in his eyes. The glaring still bothered Naruto even if he did his best not to show it. Karin noticed it too and grabbed Naruto's hand, giving it a comforting squeeze and a look saying it's okay. I'm here. Naruto smiled gladly at her and they walked on ahead hand in hand. Sasuke wanted to know why, but he figured he should ask another time since he guessed Naruto must have done something the villagers did not like. 10 minutes later they walked into the Uchiha compound. The other Uchiha members saw Sasuke walk in with the two Uzumakis. A few of the Uchihas saw him and scowled at his presence, while others simply ignored him. They arrived at his home, and Naruto and Karin couldn't help but look at it in amazement. The place was so big. It made their apartment look pretty insignificant in comparison. "Well, come on in," he said as he kicked off his shoes, which the other two did as well before they followed Sasuke inside the house. "Sasuke," a voice called, making the group look over to see an older boy walking towards them. The older boy looked a lot like Sasuke as he had onyx eyes, black hair with bangs that framed his face, and a low ponytail that reached into his upper back. He was wearing a black shirt with a large Uchiha clan symbol on the back and pants with a weapons pouch strapped to his back. "Hi Itachi," Sasuke said with his features brightening seeing his older brother. "These are my new friends. I brought them here to have lunch," he said, getting a nod from Itachi. "That very nice of you, Sasuke," he said with a small smile before bowing to the two Uzumakis. "It's nice to meet you, Naruto-san, Karin-san." They both bowed back. "It's nice to meet you as well, Itachi-san," they both said respectfully before the older boy turned to Sasuke. "Why don't you stay and have lunch with us, big brother?" he said, hoping his brother would join, but Itachi shook his head and poked Sasuke on the head, causing the boy to let out a small ouch. As Karin and Sasuke walked forward, Naruto turned around and saw the cold and sad look appear on Itachi's face before the older boy turned his head and left the compound. They continued to walk down the hallway before Sasuke pulled on one of the sliding doors and walked into the kitchen where his mother was once again preparing lunch. Mikoto turned around and smiled seeing her son come into the room before noticing the other two children that walked in with him. She looked at Karin and knew she was in Uzumaki from the hair. Her hair was so much like Kushina's, but she was a little intrigued by the odd hairstyle Karin had. But when she saw Naruto she almost dropped what she was carrying. She had not seen him up close before, but now that she did she was amazed at how much like his parents he looked like. His hair and features are just like his father, but he has his mother heart-shaped face, and I know from what I have heard about him from others that he has his mother personality. "Mom, these are my friends Karin and Naruto Uzumaki," he said as both Uzumakis bowed their heads to the Uchiha matriarch. "It's nice to meet you, Uchiha-sama," they both said politely. "It's nice to meet you both as well, but please just call me Mikoto," she said as both nodded. "Well, since I'm guessing you three are here for lunch, take a seat at the table and it will be ready in a few moments," she said, motioning to the table to which they then sat around. They didn't have to wait long and just chatted about their training before Mikoto put down a few assortment bento boxes in front of them, getting starry, hungry looks from all three, while Naruto was slightly drooling before they all began to chow down. "Hold on," she said before she went into one of the kitchen drawers and pulled out the top of the healing cream that Sasuke knew all too well. Though Karin looked relatively fine, Sasuke and Naruto were covered in scratches and cuts again. "Hold still," she said to Sasuke as her youngest son rolled his eyes a little but let his mom put cream over the cuts on his face and hands before she covered them with small bandages. "You too, Naruto, hold still," she said, moving in front of him, catching the blonde off guard, though he remained still. Naruto felt a warm sensation run through his body when she put the healing cream on his cuts and wondered if this was the feeling other kids got when their mothers dotted on them. Once she was done putting the small bandages on Naruto and his smiling at her in return, which gave her a similar warm feeling run through her. She put away the cream and joined them at the table. She knew Fugaku would not be joining them today since he had plenty of work to do down at the police station and Itachi was doing Kami knows what. "Itachi, why have you become so distant from us lately? What have I done to upset you, my son?" She thought before shaking out her thoughts and intending on enjoying her time with her youngest son and his new friends. She took a seat next to Sasuke as she picked at her meal, but she kept stealing glances at Naruto and was just amazed at how similar to her old friend he was. The small mannerisms, the grin and smile were all Kushina's. "So how was training today then?" she asked, making the three look up from their meals. "It went well, Mom. We practiced our taijutsu today and I won every time," Sasuke said proudly as he puffed out his chest a little. Even though Naruto didn't like that sentence very much. "You got lucky, Sasuke. Just wait until next time, I'll be so much stronger that I'll kick your ass from here to the moon," he said, getting a frown from Sasuke as he glanced back. "You want to go again right now?" Sasuke asked lowly. "Yeah, I do, let's go right now," Naruto said as he got up from the table before the two once again began to fight. Karin sighed loudly since this was beginning to become a regular thing between the two. Why can't these two just act like normal friends for once instead of rivals? "Oh my," Mikoto said as she put her hand up to her mouth trying to stop a laugh from coming out. She was not used to seeing Sasuke show this side of him before and had to wonder if Naruto's friendship brought out the more competitive side of him. Though when they both fell to the ground and hit the table nearly causing the plates to fall off, Mikoto wiped away her smile before a determined frown appeared on her face. She stood up from her seat, shot her hands forwards and grabbed Naruto and Sasuke by the ear, causing them both to yelp in pain. "Ow, ow, ow, Mom, let me go," Sasuke cried out. "Mikoto-san, you're pulling my ear off," Naruto whined. Makoto gave them both a scolding look. No fighting in the kitchen. If you two want to punch and kick each other then do it outside. I won't have you both destroying this house from your little spats, she said with a scolding tone, making both boys look down. Sorry mom, Makoto-san, they both said, making the frown disappear from her face and for the smile to return to it. Very good. Now get back to your meals, and then if you don't mind I would quite like to see how well your training has been for you all, she said, getting a look of surprise from the three before they all broke out into smiles and went back to eating. She was curious to see how far her son had come since he began training with the two Uzumakis and was curious to see how they were too. She may be a housewife, but once upon a time she was once a jounin of the village and only stopped active duty because she wanted to raise her children properly. She may have been a little rusty, but she was sure that she still had in it her to go toe-to-toe with most of the jounin in the village. As Makoto was about to get back to her meal, she had a small tug on her sleeve and turned to see Karin looking at her with a determined look on her face. Please teach me how to stop those two like you just did, she asked, getting a grin from Makoto. Oh, how she liked this girl already. Makoto complied and began telling Karin how to handle out-of-control boys. Later on, Naruto said, rubbing his lower back as he and Karin slowly left the Uchiha compound. Who knew Makoto-san could be such a slave drive, he said as Karin nodded, rubbing her rear end after Kami knows how many times she landed on it after some more sparring. After lunch they had shown how far they had come in their training over the past few months, as did Sasuke, and Makoto was impressed by how determined the trio were. She could see great things come from this little group if they kept practicing as they did. She disappeared for a few minutes before walking back out in her old sparring uniform, taking the trio, especially Sasuke, by surprise and told she would spar with them for a little while since she was a little rusty and wanted to show them that she was more than just a housewife. The three promptly got their butts kicked and were never able to land a single hit on the Uchiha matriarch. While Naruto and Karin were surprised by her power, Sasuke was utterly gobsmacked. He never realized just how strong his mother actually was. No doubt now he would be asking his mother for future help when it comes to his shinobi training. When Fugaku arrived home and saw the three kids on the ground panting while Makoto flicked her hair, a small smile appeared on his face. He could not remember the last time he had seen her in her old sparring outfit and no doubt enjoyed seeing her in it once again. It certainly still looked good on her and showed her figure well. So are we going home now? Naruto asked, hoping the answer was yes, but Karin shook her head much to his sadness. We said we would go to the library, remember? We said we would try to find some books on jutsu and elemental jutsu. Plus it was your idea, remember? Ever since you saw Sasuke use his fire jutsu you have wanted to try and learn an elemental jutsu, she said. Oh yeah, Naruto thought before he grabbed hold of Karin's hand, making her blush a little at the contact before the two sped off towards the library. Karin always felt warm being near Naruto or being in contact with him. His chakra was just so warm, it was like a constant warm hug from a brother that cared about you. They quickly arrived and quietly walked inside and headed towards the shinobi part of the library that Iruka had shown him. The lady at the desk saw but didn't bother glaring or scowling since so far he had not done anything wrong, so for now she simply let him be. They headed up the stairs and went to the rows of bookcase for shinobi studying and began to examine the spines of the books for anything that could help them. Shinobi nations, chakra exercises, water walking for dummies, aim and accuracy with shinobi weapons. Where are they? Naruto wondered. Karin was wondering the same as she examined the bookshelves. Maybe they're on the higher shelves, she said, getting a nod from Naruto, who grabbed a hold of one of the shelf ladders and rolled it over towards them. I take it there is something you need, a voice called, making them both turn around to see a girl who was looked to be either 2 to 3 years older, with light blonde hair that was tied in a single ponytail. She had a white coat over a red dress and blue shinobi sandals. On her face was a pair of swirl-like glasses on them. Oh hi, Karin said as Naruto was halfway up the ladder. We are sorry for any noise we were making, but we were just trying to see if the jutsu portion of the shinobi archives were on the top shelf, she answered honestly, making the girl look at them a little oddly. Jutsu, aren't you two a little young to be thinking about jutsu, especially elemental jutsu? You both do know that mainly Chunin shinobi practice elemental ninjutsu, right? Well, how come Sasuke can do a fire jutsu and he is our age? Naruto asked from his spot on the ladder. The girl looked at him. Is this Sasuke by any chance? Sasuke Uchiha, the youngest son of the Uchiha clan head? She asked, getting small nods from them. Well, fire jutsu have always been something the Uchiha clan excels in, so it is no surprise that he knows of fire jutsu. My name is Shiho, by the way, I work at the library. Naruto and Karin frowned a little. Aren't you a shinobi since you're wearing the headband? They said, spotting the leaf headband on her forehead. That's right. I'm a genin, but I am training to be a cryptographer, she said, getting confused looks from the two. A cryptographer is someone who's specializing in deciphering secret codes and messages, she answered, getting understanding looks from the two Uzumakis. I work in the library as part of genin duties, plus it helps with training, since many of the books in here have all sorts of symbols and deciphering methods. I'm Karin Uzumaki, and this is Naruto Uzumaki, Karin said, getting a nod from Shiho, who eyed Naruto a little cautiously, but she didn't really get what all the fuss was about with him. He seemed like a decent enough kid. So you said you were looking for jutsu? She said, getting rapid nods from the two as she sighed. Go up to the top of the shelf and look for book that says Academy Basic Jutsu. Since I doubt you know them, they would be good jutsu to practice with. Also look for Academy chakra exercises. That stuff like kunai balancing, she said, getting smiles and nods from the two before Naruto made his way up. I know what they are, but I was never any good at them, Naruto thought, but now was good time to start relearning the basics and getting them down correctly. Plus Karin did not know them, and he wanted to learn them again with her. Okay, let me see, Naruto thought as he looked at the wide variety of books. There were some that said medical jutsu basics, advanced chakra control exercises, history of the mist. His eyes stopped when he saw Fuinjutsu for beginners. He would have to come back for that. He kept searching and searching until he found the book entitled Academy Basics 101. Ah, here we are, Naruto said as he grabbed the book, but found it would not budge. Hey, what the hell, he thought as he grabbed it with two hands and began to pull. Naruto, please be careful, Karin said, but it was already too late. The book was finally pulled out, but in doing so it caused the other books to be knocked off and for Naruto to lose his balance and fell of the ladder. Incoming, he said as he landed on top of Karin and Shiho, knocking them to the ground as the other books all fell on top of them, making a fair bit of noise, but Naruto hoped it was not enough to bring the attention of the woman at the desk. Ow, that was not fun, he said, rubbing his head before his eyes went back towards the shelf where the books were and his eyes narrowed in on something. Aka, Karin said, whacking Naruto on the back of the head. Shiho did not look all that impressed either. I told you to be careful, Karin said, but saw Naruto was not even paying any attention to her. Hey, are you listening, she said. Not getting a response, she focused in on the point where Naruto was looking. After a few minutes of searching, she spotted what he was looking at, as did Shiho. What is that? Naruto said, getting back on the ladder and climbing back up the top shelf. When the books had been forced of the top shelf, the impact of being knocked against the wood of the top shelf and some sort of hatch on it flew open. Naruto arrived back at the top of the ladders, being careful not to make a similar incident from earlier, before he looked into the small hatch that had been open. Reaching inside, his hand looked around before it knocked again 3 items. Using both hands, he grabbed them and pulled them out. He closed the small hatch before he walked back down where Karin and Shiho were waiting. When he got down, he showed them what he found. In one hand was some sort of old book that looked a little weathered but in decent condition, while in his other hand was a scroll. What are 2 scrolls doing being hidden away in a shelf? Karin said aloud as Shiho began to examine the first scroll. It was beige in color with red-yellow edges. She turned it over a little and let out a small gasp when she saw it. What? What is it? Both Uzumakis asked. This symbol, she said, showing them some kind of symbol that both Naruto and Karin could recognize but couldn't quite place it. It's the symbol of the Senju clan, she said, making them both look at it in wonder. What on earth is this doing here? What about the other one? Karin said as their attention moved to the second scroll. This scroll, unlike the other one, was beige as well, but had red and blue edges. Shiho turned it around, but this time it was Naruto and Karin that gasped in realization when they saw it. That's the symbol for the Uzumaki clan, Naruto said, gently taking the scroll from Shiho's hands and into his own. The red Uzumaki swirl was present on it. I didn't even know our clan had scrolls like this left, he said, getting a nod of agreement from Karin. The Hokage probably does not even know they exist. Since you found them, Naruto, you should probably go and show them to him. You said your last name is Uzumaki, right, she said, getting a nod from the two. Well, in that case he will probably let you keep it since its does belong to your family, but he may take the Senju one away, she said with Naruto nodding before he gathered the 2 scrolls in the book and hid them under his shirt since he doubted the librarian knew about them and would let him just take it like that. He did not want to risk it. Karin grabbed the book on Academy Basics as well and both bolted back towards the front desk as they waved and thanked Shiho for the help. The lady at front desk looked suspiciously at them but stamped the book out for lease before Naruto and Karin bounded towards the Hokage tower. Gigi Hiruzen heard as he sat at his desk in the Hokage office before the door to his office door slammed open only to see Naruto and Karin staring up at him, both panting a little and holding something in their hands. His papers on his desk fell of his desk much to his annoyance and scattered the office floor. Naruto and Karin entering his office was always like a tornado storming through when they visited. "No," he shouted in his mind and swore he could hear giggling and chuckles from behind the walls where his Anbu usually hid. "Did you got to see this?" Naruto said, getting rapid nods from Karin as both had an eager and excited look on their faces. "Naruto, Karin, you can't just keep turning up in my office whenever you feel like it. I'm very busy with all this paperwork you see now lying around your feet," he said in a bit of an annoyed tone. "Gigi, this is really important. You have to see what we found, Karin said, trying to press the conversation further, making the Hokage sigh in defeat. Despite being a Hokage, he still could not win all arguments and conversations with children. Alright, he said, rubbing his forehead. What did you find? He said before Karin suddenly held out two scrolls in her hand while Naruto showed the diary-like book to him. Hiruzen was a little surprised to see there were scrolls that they were holding before he leaned in and took a closer look. When he did, Karin turned the scrolls over to show the symbols that were on them. When he saw them, Hiruzen's eyes almost fell out of his head and almost tripped and had to hold himself up on his desk. Those scrolls, he whispered as he reached for them and took them into his hands. He first thought they were fake, but after seeing the symbols, the coloring of the scrolls and the texture of the scroll, he knew they were very, very real. Anbu, leave the room, he said. After a few seconds he heard a few shunshin sounds. He then placed a silencing seal all around the room before he looked at the two Uzumakis with an interested looks in his eyes. Naruto, Karin, please tell me how you came into possession of these scrolls. So they did. They told him how they went to the library to look up some elemental jutsu when Naruto pulled one of the books out to hard, but it ended up opening a secret compartment. They figured out what they were holding with Shiho before they headed straight for him. Hiruzen nodded and told them he was glad they came straight to him. Though he would have to have Shiho sworn not to let anyone know about the scrolls, since the scrolls they were holding should not even exist anymore. I must admit, Naruto, Karin, that you two have some of the most amazing luck I have ever seen. To think that these scrolls still existed behind our walls. The Senju clan scrolls belong to the only living Senju still alive, Tsunade Senju, and since she is not in the village, they are all locked away in the Senju compound. But this, he said, holding the Uzumaki scroll in his hands, making both Uzumakis grin. I did not even think an Uzumaki scroll still existed. Most were believed to have been destroyed during Yuzu's destruction. Even your mother, Naruto, only had a few scrolls, and they are currently stored away until you come of age to receive them. Naruto stared, holding his hands behind his back, which Karin copied. Can we open them? Hiruzen took a deep breath and studied the scrolls and looked at the two youngsters' face. They both looked a little excited, though he could not blame them, since they just found a scroll that contained some kind of Uzumaki secrets or jutsu. That, and if the council heard of them finding these scrolls, they may try to take them from them both, which Hiruzen desperate did not want. He took a deep breath before he spoke to the two. The Senju scroll we cannot open since it belongs to the Senju clan, and since no Senju is in the village at the moment, it would break their trust if we opened it, he said, getting downcast look from both Naruto and Karin. However, he said, making their heads shoot up. Since you two are the only Uzumakis left and this is an Uzumaki scroll, then I don't see why you can't read it, he said, getting giant smiles from the two. Then what are we waiting for? Naruto said as he grabbed the scroll and slowly and delicately placed it on the Hokage's desk and slowly opened it. Karin and Hiruzen stood beside him looking over his shoulder, both also very curious to see what was written inside. The scroll opened and they all looked at the parchment. Written on the scroll form what Hiruzen could see was a set list of justice. As Naruto continued to open them, he counted them all and discovered 6 justice in total, all written in neat handwriting with the necessary hand signs, and next to them was a brief description of what each jutsu does. Gigi, are these jutsu? Naruto asked and got a delighted sparkle in his eye when he saw the Hokage nod his head. Whoa, so cool, so are these like clan jutsu? Karin asked as Hiruzen examined them closer before speaking. I believe they are, he said towards the two as he picked up the scrolls. From what I can see there are 6 jutsu in total, however I have noticed that all 6 are water jutsu. He knew that by both the name and the water element symbol next to the jutsu names. Then beside them there seems to be a rank, he said, pointing to the other symbols next to them. The first 4 seem to be C rank jutsu, while these other 2 look to be B class jutsu. All water based and ones that seem the Uzumaki clan made for members of the clan. Naruto and Karin nodded at the answer. But how come they are all water, thought? Karin asked. Well, both she and Naruto were happy to find some jutsu that their clan had just for them, just like Sasuke and the Uchiha had their fireball jutsu. She wondered why they were all just water and had no other element. Ah, well, you are aware that some clans are more in tune with certain element, like the Uchiha clan excels in fire-based jutsu, correct? He said as both Naruto and Karin nodded. Well, the same could be said for the Uzumaki clan and water-based jutsu. They excelled in anything water-related, though I'm not surprised since they lived in a place with water all around them and called themselves Whirlpool Village. Whoa, they both thought. They both knew that the Uzumaki clan excelled in Fuinjutsu and Kinjutsu, and while Karin was interested in taking up Fuinjutsu just like her ancestor Mito, who was a sealing genius, Naruto wanted the whole package and master both. But now hearing that Uzumakis excelled in water-based jutsu as well, it just made them even more determined, and both wanted to somehow master the jutsu that their predecessors made for them. Now what about that? Hiruzen said, motioning towards the small diary that Karin was currently holding. Oh well, we're not really sure. It was in the compartment with the scrolls. We figured it must have been important, so we brought it with us just in case. Karin mentioned, handing over the book as Naruto continued to look at the Uzumaki scroll. Hiruzen hummed to himself as he looked it over. He was not sure why, but he felt like he had seen this book before. Though he figured it must have been when he was much younger. He opened the first page but frowned when he saw no writing on the page. Looking at it for a moment, he figured it must have been a chakra enforced area sorts, meaning he had to pour chakra into the book in order to see what was written. Quickly enough, as soon as he did, words began to form on the page. Though when he did and he saw the handwriting, it almost made his blood completely freeze. This is not possible, he thought. He was in shock because he recognized the handwriting. He recognized it from anywhere because he knew the person who wrote this very well. Down at the bottom of the first page, he saw the initials that had confirmed his suspicions. TS. His head shot up to look at Naruto and Karin and was just amazed at their luck. Finding 2 scrolls of 2 of the most famous and powerful clans in the world, as well as finding this man's diary. Hiruzen wanted to just sit down and read what was in it, since it could quite possibly have all sorts of jutsu or techniques in it that had never been seen before. But looking at Naruto and Karin, he believed that they should keep this diary since they found it, and no doubt it would help them in their career. He was already the Hokage of the Leaf and Open of the most powerful shinobis there was. Naruto and Karin both wanted to bring back their clan, and with Naruto wanting to be Hokage, they would both need all the help it could get. Maybe this notebook could help them on that path. Taking one last look at the contents of the notebook, he closed it and handed it back to Karin, who was a little surprised to get it back. "Keep it," he said. "Trust me when I say the contents that are in that notebook can help you greatly, since you both want to be great shinobi one day." "Really?" Naruto said, looking up from the scroll. "Who wrote it?" Hiruzen smiled slyly. "That will be for you to figure out, Naruto," he said, making both Uzumakis shrug at the old man being all secretive. However, he spoke with a more stern tone, making them both stand upright and listen. "I must ask that you both do not reveal that you have that scroll or that book. Trust me when I say they are both very valuable and many would like to get their hands on them. They would go for a very high price, and the contents on that scroll and in that book could be the only ones in existence," he said, making both Uzumakis realize how serious it was. "So keep them both safe and keep them secret," he said as Naruto and Karin nodded as the Hokage got up and as quick as lightning put the Senju scroll away in the Hokage safe. "Don't worry, Gigi. No one will be getting them. These are clan jutsu, therefore no one else is allowed to learn them except Uzumakis," he said, puffing out his chest, while Karin settled for smiling brightly. "Very well," Hiruzen said as Naruto and Karin took the scroll and the notebook, hid them underneath their clothes before they left the office. Hiruzen turned around before he slumped in defeat when he noticed that his paperwork had somehow doubled during the visit. "Damn you, paperwork," he cried out, shaking his fists to the skies. Uzumaki residence that evening. Naruto and Karin sat on Naruto's bed as they examined the Uzumaki scroll they found. They had not put it down ever since they got in and had barely noticed that night was beginning to set in. "We have to learn these jutsu. We will be so badass with these jutsu and we will be able to match Sasuke and his fire jutsu." "Yes, but these are for at least Chunin level shinobi, Naruto-kun. We will have to wait a few years until we can learn them properly. Look, 2 of them are B ranked and the other 4 are C ranked. We only just started ED rank jutsu right now." Oh, Naruto complained, but he knew she was right. "But it doesn't mean we can't read the descriptions for them so that we can prepare for when we do learn them," she said, grinning as Naruto did the same before they both dove into the scroll again. "Suiton. Hebadama no Jutsu, water style. Serpent bullet technique, a jutsu that involves the user building up water in their mouth before they release it at high speed towards their target. The bullet is about the size of a softball, and if it hits the target it will sting like getting hit by rubber bullets. I know rubber bullets don't exist in Naruto's world, but that's how the pain would be best described." Suiton. Hari Karetsu Jutsu, water style. Needle burst, a jutsu involving the user building up water on their hands where when they swing they launch senbon needle-like points of water that when they hit the target causes cramps and the muscles to go numb since the attack momentarily stopped the blood from flowing through. Suiton. Awakakum no Jutsu, water style. Bubble dome, a jutsu used to create a dome of water over the user's head, providing them a respiratory system to breathe underwater without the use of equipment. This is usually used for safe underwater travel or as an escape route by hiding underwater for enemies and faking death by making them think you drowned and your body sank to the bottom. Suiton. Suja no Kiba, water style. Hydra Fang, a paralyzing water jutsu that covers the user's hands in water-shaped hydra heads that are used to fight into jutsu. When the hydra heads bite the opponent they cause muscle failure that immobilizes them for a moment, which creates a perfect opening for a finishing move. "Wow, and these are clan techniques," Karin said as she looked them over. She especially liked the hydra one. That sounded cool and no doubt would look cool as well. Though it's a shame there are not any healing techniques. Those probably could have come in handy. While they both had read about different shinobi aspects, Karin had taken a great liking to medical ninjutsu and was hoping that when they joined the academy, they would teach them a thing or two about it. Since her special chakra could heal other, she felt like she could become something great in that area of being a shinobi. So these would be the first ones we would learn from the scroll, since they are the easier one of the scroll. And then down here are the two harder ones that are more powerful, but will probably take more control in chakra. So that's why we should not learn them until we are older. Naruto said with Karin nodded. Remember what Iruka-sensei said. The stronger the jutsu, the more chakra is needed. Too little and nothing will happen, and too much could prove fatal to the user. Naruto remembered that since Iruka had been very serious when telling them both. He reminded them to stick to things that were their level and to not attempt more powerful jutsu without supervision from either him or another Chunin or higher. Suiton. Bakuhatsu Kanketsusen, no jutsu, water style. Exploding geyser unleashes a tower of water from the ground that can be controlled to follow the target. When the geyser hits the enemy they become disoriented and the geyser has them get flung into the air where they're left wide open for attack. Suiton. Sujirek no jutsu, water style. Hydra dragon, similar to the water dragon, except that it unleashes 3 dragon heads around the user and forms a water shield around the user. The heads can be used to attack, grapple and shoot water from a distance. If trained properly the user can multiply the amount of heads which can increase their size, power and durability. Now that sounds powerful. Especially the last one. But I wonder if we could use them though, Karin said, confusing Naruto. Remember what the book of basic jutsu says, she said, motioning to the book they got from the library today. Everyone has a natural element affinity. If we have water then it will be easier for us to learn them, but if we don't, it will be a lot more difficult. Naruto said, tapping his chin. Maybe we can ask Jiji or Iruka-sensei what our elements are. That way we know what they are, plus the book said here are exercises we can learn to help prepare us for element jutsu, he said with Karin nodding. Plus remember Iruka-sensei wanted you to go in for an IQ test so that they could figure out just how far you are in your studies and know what level you are at. Isn't that true? Then I guess we have tomorrow planned out. But do you think we can ask for our affinities? We are a little young, she said, but Naruto shrugged. It's not like we will be practicing the jutsu, we just want to learn what affinity we both have and maybe do a few of the exercises. Like if we are water then we have to make a leaf wet with just our chakra if we had a water affinity, I think Karin mentioned, since she remembered that from one of the books. And remember Makoto-san said that those with fire had to make a leaf burn with their chakra. We can go and ask Iruka-sensei tomorrow. He should be in the academy offices so we can go then. But Karin said as she looked at the time, seeing it read 7 o'clock and was time for them to make dinner. Naruto, it's your turn to make dinner tonight, she said, putting her hands on her hips and giving him the look that all girls gave boys when they wanted something done and left the boy without any argument. Yes, ma'am. What would you like me to make? Perhaps some curry and rice tonight with chopped up vegetable too, he said, getting an eager nod from Karin, making him laugh a little. The kitchen router that they had both set up was Karin would cook on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, while Naruto got Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. Then on Sunday they would eat at Ichiraku's. Both of their cooking was coming along nicely and were able to make the easy stuff since AM had wrote down the instruction to the smallest detail. AM even mentioned if his cooking got any better then he would make a fine house husband, which made him blush and go red. Well then you better get to it, then she promoted as Naruto simply gave a small nod before making his way to the kitchen. After all the excitement of the day both had forgotten about the diary that they had found as well in the compartment, but the excitement of finding an Uzumaki scroll left them both a little tired and after dinner had an early night's sleep. 9:30 p.m. Karin was wandering in a field covered in darkness. She couldn't see where she was going and didn't even know where she was for that matter. How'd I get here and where am I? She asks herself as she kept looking around for anything she could see. Suddenly the darkness began to clear up, but when it did Karin's face paled and could swear her heart stopped for a moment. The darkness faded to reveal that she was in some kind of hallway that was only lit by dim lights. But what scared Karin was that she knew this place. It was where she was held captive before she was found, rescued and brought to Konoha. HSSS, a voice hissed as Karin was startled and she turned to see where the voice came from. She looked at every dark corner in fear as she took a step back. Suddenly a pair of yellow eyes revealed themselves from the shadows of a dark corner. The eyes looked to be about 4 feet off the ground. Karin was struck by a dark sensation as her body seemed to freeze when her own eyes landed on the ones that were staring back at her with coldness. The eyes began to move forward until the figure came out of the darkness to reveal a large gray snake that was over 16 long. The snake hissed at Karin, showing its forked tongue as it looked at her with what she thought was hunger. Not wasting a moment, Karin turned and ran away as the snake didn't move from its spot, but Karin didn't care as she kept running looking for any way out. Seconds turned to minutes as she kept running, but the hall just seemed to go on and on with no end. However, eventually Karin came by a crossroad that had 3 doors on different sides of the walls and each having a window on the center. Karin carefully looked inside the door on the left but couldn't see anything inside. The same happened with the center door, but when she peeked into the door on the right, she saw there were flickering lights inside that revealed a small pathway to another door head. Slowly she opened the door and walked down the hall until she reached the next door, where this one didn't have a window for her to see inside, so she had no idea what's behind it. Like before, she slowly opened the door as it creaked from rust, and she looked inside to see what looked like a medical chamber with tools, a medical strapping bed, books and other things used for study. Why am I here? She thought to herself as she stepped inside before she felt a hand clasp her shoulder. She froze mid-step and heard a low chuckle form behind. Turning around, all she saw was a man completely black from the shadows, and the only thing that stood out was his gold snake-like eyes. "My dear, where did you go? We were going to have so much fun," he said in the most sinister voice she had ever heard in her life and was bringing back horrid memories of her time in there. She shook around, but the man hand never left her should and simple tightened. She began to scream before every around her went hazy and could hear someone shouting her name. "Karin, wake up," she heard before suddenly everything around her changed and she found herself back in her and Naruto's room with a worried looking Naruto looking down at her. "Karin-chan," he said looking at her before she burst into tears and wrapped him in a hug with her head buried in his chest. "It felt so real," she stuttered out through her sobbing while Naruto gently guided them back down onto the bed. He did not quite know what to do, so he settled with just continuing to cuddle her while rubbing her back in a circle. He smiled, sincerely saying, "It's okay, Karin-chan. I'm here." Next day, Iruka sat in his office as he went through the necessary paperwork that all teachers had to go through. Even though he had a few more months until he needed to go through the files, he wanted to get an early start on them in order to prevent a pile-up from forming. The few times he was at the Hokage's office and he saw all the piles of paperwork he could never beat made him want to avoid the same fate. Although he knew he'd never receive the same amount of papers, he felt it was better to play it safe. Being a teacher, although was not his original choice of work, he eventually found his calling in training and preparing the next generation of shinobi of the Leaf Village. A role that for many would make Iruka their first shinobi instructor, and he hoped that when many began their shinobi careers, he had prepared them well enough to make it. Though he rarely spoke of it, many thought Iruka was a simple Chunin instructor with Chunin level abilities. They were pretty much right about that, but he didn't let it bother him. In the past, Iruka had tried out for the Chunin exams to promote his rank and to become a sensei for 3 students, but sadly he failed the test and remained a Chunin. He could have taken the test again after a while, but he decided not to since he found out he liked being a teacher, and even if he won't get students that'll learn from only him like Chunin senseis did, he was still happy to teach many students as much as he could before they set out to become genin. Besides, Iruka was actually glad to remain a teacher since it had him remain in the village peacefully. The night the Kyuubi attacked and he saw his parents die had made him dislike confrontation. That's not to say that he wouldn't fight for the village, but it's just that he prefers the peaceful way. He was sometimes still haunted by nightmares of the Kyuubi as he could remember its sinister and enraged look in its eyes as it destroyed the village. He knew Naruto was innocent of being suspected of being a monster, although sometimes he wondered what it was like for the Kyuubi to be sealed inside Naruto. Was it like being trapped in a small cage? Was it even conscious inside Naruto? Could it see what Naruto sees? Those were some things that made him curious. Well, whatever it was like, he hoped the Kyuubi was disliking its new home and never got to see the light of day again. As Iruka worked, he heard soft footsteps approaching his office. He looked up just as the door opened, revealing Naruto and Karin. Iruka had quickly taken a liking to Karin after seeing how good she was to and for Naruto. Since she arrived, Naruto had been a lot more upbeat, and Iruka knew that Naruto was just happy to finally have a friend who was both his age and also was a part of the same family as he was. Good morning you two," he said cheerfully as the two returned the hello and smiles with eager look on their faces. "I take it you're here for your test," Karin, Iruka said as Kari nodded, which prompted Iruka to get up and start looking through one of his cabinets. After a few seconds he pulled out what he was looking for before stepping towards them. "Okay Karin, you know what this test is about, right?" he asked with her nodding again. "Good, this test will let us know how far along in shinobi training you are so that we can take a guess at how far along we think you are and so we can put you in the correct class. You will have an hour to complete this test, so just take your time and don't panic," he said. "Okay," she said back with confidence in her voice. She felt ready to knock the test out of the park. "Naruto, I will have to ask that you wait in here with me since Karin cannot have any distraction or help during the exam." "Okay Iruka-sensei," Naruto said before he hugged Karin. "Good luck Karin-chan. I know you're going to do great," he said with a giant smile and wishing Karin the best of luck even though he knew she would do great anyway. "Thank you Naruto-kun," she said, blushing a little from the hug before Iruka led her out of the office and into one of the classroom where she would sit to take her test. Naruto only waited a few minutes before Iruka came back and proceeded to go back to his paperwork as well as make light conversation with Naruto while he waited. They spoke about the sort of training Naruto and Karin had been doing in the past few weeks, as well as meeting Sasuke and him becoming their friends. Iruka was surprised that the two Uzumakis had managed to become friends with the youngest son of the current Uchiha head, since many knew how prideful the Uchiha could be, and since they mostly kept to themselves, not really talking with any of the other clans in Konoha. Naruto didn't tell Iruka about the scrolls he found either, since even though he trusted Iruka with his life, it was a clan scroll, and it therefore only involves the clan and no one else. He might tell Iruka of its existence eventually, but until then he wanted to keep it safe, since who knows who else could have been listening, and he did not want to risk losing a piece of family heritage. Very quickly the hour was up and Karin came back into the office with her test sheet in hand and handed it over to Iruka, who told her it would be completed and marked within the next few days and that he would come over personally and tell her how she did. However, before the duo left, the conversation from the previous night hit Naruto. Iruka-sensei, Naruto asked, getting the older man's attention as his gaze looked towards Naruto. This might sound a little odd, but could we find out what our element affinities are? Iruka, in every sense of the word, was a little surprised by the question. He doubted the two Uzumakis were ready for the element training just yet. Naruto, Karin, you two are in the academy. You won't be able to learn element jutsu yet. It's a very advanced form of ninjutsu. We know, Karin quickly answered. We know we are not trained enough and don't have the control for it yet, but we would like to learn what our affinity are. Maybe even learn some control exercises for them, Naruto added with Karin nodding. I don't know, Iruka said, scratching the back of his head. If they just wanted to find out their affinities, then he did not mind that, but he did not want them to get ahead of themselves. That could later lead to an accident that ended up hurting them both. Iruka sighed before giving them a serious look. If I let you discover your affinities, promise me that you will not attempt an element-based jutsu without a Chunin-level shinobi watching or trying one until your reserves and element control are enough. Do we have a deal? He asked in teacher mode. They both nodded their heads adamantly before Iruka sighed again before he opened one of his desk drawers and fumbled around searching for his objective. After a couple of seconds he found what he was looking for and pulled out 2 slips of paper and handed them both to Naruto and Karin. Okay, listen closely. Those 2 slips of paper you are both holding are called chakra paper. Its purpose is that when a shinobi pours their chakra into the paper, one of 5 things will happen. If the paper begins to burn, it means your affinity is fire. If it becomes soggy, then it's water. If it crinkles, it's lightning. If it gets cut, then you're wind. And finally, if it crumbles away, then it's earth. Like so, he said, holding a piece of chakra paper in his own hands and poured a little chakra into it. After a couple of seconds the piece of paper began to crumble away. It crumbled away, so it means you have earth element, Karin said with Iruka nodding. That's right, and to be able to perform earth jutsu I had to first learn to control my earth element with chakra exercises. Once we are done here I will give you each an element exercise that you can practice with, he said, getting both a little excited. Karin, why don't you go first, he said as Karin began to focus on her piece of chakra paper. She got a concentrated look on her face and took a deep breath. Slowly she began to pour chakra into the paper. After a few seconds she thought nothing had happened before she felt the paper get damper. When she looked at the paper she saw it was completely wet and was only getting wet. After another few seconds the paper completely evaporated into water, causing her to take a step back. Water element, Naruto said, being the first to speak. That's your element, Karin-chan. Your affinity is water. That's awesome, he said, wrapping her in a tight hug, making the red-haired girl let out a small giggle. Iruka meanwhile looked at the puddle on the floor before looking at Karin with slightly widened eyes. What an affinity. I have never seen a water affinity that strong before. He thought as he couldn't believe how the paper had completely evaporated from being soaked. He'd never seen that before. The closest he'd ever heard was the paper getting completely soaked but still intact. Shaking his head and knowing he should tell the Hokage about it later, he moved on to Naruto. Okay Naruto, why don't you give it a try? Right, Iruka-sensei, Naruto answered as he tightened his grip on his piece of chakra paper. Taking a deep breath he slowly poured chakra into the slip. He was glad his control was a lot better thanks to the chakra exercises, otherwise he knew he would have destroyed the paper with too much chakra. Just like Karin, it took a few seconds before he got his answers. He heard loud dripping noises before the paper in his hand became lighter. He looked at it and saw the paper had been completed shredded to pieces along, while the edges seemed a little damp. Not much, but they could all about see it. Whoa, Naruto said looking at the shredded paper. Wind element, your affinity is wind, Naruto-kun, Karin said, now returning the hug Naruto gave her moment before. Yeah, I guess I am, he said, though Kari noticed it sounded a little down. What's wrong, Naruto-kun? She asked with a bit of concern in her eyes. Naruto bit his lip. It's just now that I know I have a wind affinity, will I be able to do those water jutsu we got from our clan scroll? Karin bit her lip and understood why he was a little disappointed. Didn't you see the chakra paper? Even though it cut in pieces, some of the edges were damp. They were, Naruto said as he looked over at the edges of some of the paper and spotting that Karin was right. What does it mean? Karin tapped her chin. Maybe a secondary affinity, she said, though Naruto looked a little confused, so she elaborated on it. I read that everyone has a primary affinity, which in your case is wind. That's your main one. But shinobi also have a secondary affinity. It's not as powerful as their primary affinity, but if trained right it can still become powerful and useful. Also, shinobi are known for using multiple elements anyway. It just means you might have to work that little bit harder in order to use the water jutsu, she said, with Naruto just nodding his head. Iruka meanwhile watched with his eye widened a little. But still, that's quite a wind affinity. It's very rare for someone from the leaf to have a wind affinity, and there are only a handful who can use them here. But the affinity is so strong. It sheared the piece of paper and even showed what his secondary affinity is. What on earth are these two going to become? He thought before he shook his head. Okay, so with that done, we have discovered that Karin has a high affinity for water, while Naruto has a high affinity for wind and water for a secondary. I hope you are both happy with the results. They both nodded, though Naruto took a little longer to do so. But nonetheless he looked as happy as Iruka expected him to be. Iruka then took out a small bit of a scroll along with a pen and began writing in it. The two children tried to see what he was writing, but Iruka's arm was in the way. After about a minute, Iruka put the pen down and handed a small scroll over to the two. Both Naruto and Karin took a look inside and read the contents. Those are some chakra control techniques for those who want to train to use element jutsu. It's very simple and is called the leaf exercise. Sort of similar to the standard chakra control exercise you do with a leaf. However, instead you will be using your chakra to affect the leaf. For Karin, you will be trying to make the leaf damp, and you won't have mastered the exercise until the leaf is completely damp. For Naruto, you have to try and use wind chakra to cut the leaf in half. I must tell you now that it will take you both at least a few weeks, maybe a few months, to fully use nature chakra to fully affect the leaf. It is Shunin level for a reason. Right, we understand, Iruka-sensei, Naruto said, though he hoped they could get the leaf exercise done as quick as possible, since doing it for a few months sounded a little boring in Naruto's opinion, though he was sure Karin could keep him on the straight and narrow. We can go and start now, Karin answered before Naruto and Karin took off. Not before Naruto gave Iruka a quick hug and Karin gave Iruka a peck on the cheek, which made him get a small ting of red appear on his cheeks before he smiled and got on with his work. As Naruto and Karin ran out of the academy building and headed towards their usual training ground, both saw a man step out of one of the nearby stores and ran into him. The man oofed a little when they accidentally knocked into him but stayed up straight, but Naruto and Karin landed on their butts. Sorry sir, Karin said as she rubbed her behind a little before standing up. Naruto did the same and looked at the man they ran into. They recognized him as a shinobi due to the headband on his head. He was a tall man with a strong build to him with tanned skin. He had brown eyes, short, black spiky hair, and a beard. His clothing consisted of the standard Konoha ninja uniform with the sleeves rolled up halfway, flak jacket and regular shinobi sandals. Around his waist was a sash with the kanji for fire on it. That's okay kids, just watch your surroundings next time, the man said before the two nodded and continued to the training grounds. The shinobi watched them go, though he did spot the scroll in Karin's hand and began to wonder if the two were going to train. He recognized the shinobi scrolls and he knew the two of that Naruto and Karin were the Uzumaki duo his father had spoken of before. Curiosity getting the better of him and lighting a cigarette, he shunshed away, curious at the training the two Uzumakis would be training in. Later on a training ground. Okay, so how do we do this? Naruto asked as his eyes scanned the scroll in front of him as Karin also examined it. Karin tapped her chin. Well, it looks pretty similar to the leaf exercise we do for our chakra control. But instead of using it to balance, we have to try and transform our chakra into the necessary element while we pour chakra through it. You're really smart, Naruto blurted out, causing Karin's cheeks to redden a little before a sappy smile appeared on her face. And you're kind of sweet, she replied back, making Naruto get a big silly smile appear on his face. Come on, let's begin and start trying, Karin said as she seated herself underneath one of the trees by the training field, with Naruto joining her beside her. She picked up 2 leaves and handed one to Naruto. They read what Iruka had written in the scroll before they began pouring chakra into the leaf. They thought to best change the nature of their chakra, they should visualize the kind of element they were using. So Naruto began rethinking of the winds and the feel he got when the wind hit him, while Karin did the same only for water. After 2 hours they quickly found that method was not one that really led anywhere, and at best, it felt like all they were doing was wasting chakra. Even Karin had to stop after about an hour of continuous usage before she felt she needed a quick break. They wondered if Sasuke had to do this in order to learn a fire jutsu. But then again, he had his parents and the entire Uchiha clan to help him and point him in the right direction. Ugh. This is getting us nowhere, Naruto said, ruffling his own hair and falling down onto his back as he stared up at the leaves on the tree above him. You have to be patient, Naruto. Remember what Iruka said. It could take days if not weeks to even make the smallest change. Plus we are only 8 years old. It is going to take us a long time to complete this exercise. Which is why this should be something we do in our spare time. Make small improvements to it as time goes by. Naruto sighed before groaning a little. He knew she was right, but it just felt so frustrating. He wondered if this was one of the reasons many did not achieve element transformation, because it was so long and infuriating. Yeah, you are probably right as usual, he said teasingly. Karin just grinned a little before playfully sticking her tongue out at him. Element transformation at your kid's age is very rare, you know, a deep voice said, surprising them both as they looked up in the tree where the voice came from. There on one of the branches was the man they ran into earlier, slowly taking a drag on one of his cigarettes. When did you get there? Naruto asked, a little surprised. And why are you here? Karin asked too, frowning as she looked up at the shinobi above them. Well, I saw the scroll in your hands earlier and I was curious to see what training you would be doing. Though I didn't imagine you would be doing element transformation. It's Chunin level stuff and you kids look like you're still in the academy. Naruto was going to answer before Karin beat him to it. You know it's polite to introduce yourself before you ask questions, she said, making the shinobi raise his eyebrows slightly. She's got spirit, he thought before grinning. I pray Anko never gets wind of her. My apologies, my name is Asuma Sarutobi, Chunin of Konoha, the man said, getting surprised looks from both of them as Naruto stood up and looked at him. Sarutobi, they both said, getting a nod from the man. That's the same name as Jiji, Naruto said to Karin as she nodded. Are you related to him? Jiji? Asuma thought for a second before he understood who they were speaking about. Oh right, you mean my dad. Your dad? They both shouted. Old man Hokage is your dad. They both said, getting a nod from Asuma, who had his hands in his pockets and looking a little amused at their reactions. Whoa, so you are like a younger, more badass version of the old man, Naruto said, which made Asuma bark with laughter before he scratched the back of his head a little embarrassingly. Well, younger, yes. Worse is most likely, he said, grinning. Though more powerful, I'm afraid not. My old man a high S-class shinobi while I'm an A-ranked, maybe one day. But still an A-rank shinobi is pretty powerful. It means you're really strong. Hey, maybe you can help us, Naruto said, eagerly, getting a raised eyebrow from Asuma. Help you? And tell me why I would want to help two Gakis like you? Asuma said curiously. Karin huffed at being called Gaki while Naruto crossed his arms. You being here means you don't have anything better to do with your time, he said, getting another surprised look from Asuma. Plus, would it not be your duty as a leaf shinobi to help the next generation? Smug little brat, Asuma thought before he grinned. He had to admit the two kids had spirit and seemed to know how to talk in order to get what they wanted. He shrugged his shoulder before blowing smoke out of his mouth. Alright, why not, I don't have anything to do today. Plus you two seem to have piqued my interest. Both grinned knowing they were getting a Chunin to help. It could only make them improve by having one of the strongest in the village helping them. So you are a water element, he said, looking at Karin, which she nodded to before he looked at Naruto in surprise. And your wind, that is surprising considering until now I was the only other person in the village who had a wind affinity. Really, Naruto asked excitedly again. This day was getting better and better, and with Asuma helping them it could only get better. And I am guessing you are having trouble trying to transform the chakra into wind, right? He said, getting a nod from Naruto. It takes a very long time to fully transform chakra into your affinity, and wind is the most versatile. Known for cutting and maiming those it comes into contact with. When you try to transform the chakra, try and picture your chakra splitting in two and then rubbing the two halves against each other. After they sharpen each other into thin and sharp pieces and then rejoin them. Thin and sharp. Sort of like a blade then. Naruto said with Asuma nodding. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, he said before turning towards Karin. For water, thinking of your chakra as a pool of water and then swirling it around like a whirlpool. But it has to keep in motion. I guess that makes sense, Karin mentioned before the two Uzumakis went back to trying to transform their chakra and their affinity. They stayed that way for the rest of the day, with Asuma taking his place back on sitting on the tree's branch. Neither managed to make any changes, but when they put their chakra into the leaf they could feel a difference from before. They told Asuma and he told them it was a good sign. It meant they were on the right track. They finished it just before it got dark before Asuma escorted them back home with another fruitful day of training completed. 3 months later. Come on, Karin-chan. We are going to be late, Naruto shouted from the front door as he patiently waited for Karin to finish getting ready. Just 1 minute please. I'm nearly done, she said back as she tied her hair into a ponytail with a purple-colored scrunch. Today was the first day of returning to the academy for Naruto, but for Karin, it was her first day ever and she wanted it to be perfect. She had spent the last few days worrying that people would not like her, but Naruto had quickly calmed her down and simply told her she would make plenty of new friends. Plus she already had immense Sasuke with her, so that fact alone made her feel better. Plus she knew she was already placed in Iruka's class. She had passed her test with flying colors according to Iruka, and he was no doubt eager to see what she was capable of when in class. Iruka pretty much had high hopes for the two Uzumakis since Karin was a breath of fresh air and incredibly smart, while Naruto had made a huge turnaround and was a lot more focused and patient these days. "Okay, I'm done," she said, coming out of their room wearing a light purple shirt with a black skirt and black sandals. "Have you had some breakfast? I know you have skipped yesterday's," Naruto said, crossing his arms, giving her a stern glare, though he knew it was no use on her. Somehow she was immune from his glares. Yes, I had some toast earlier," she said, waving her hand and rolling her eyes, while Naruto raised an eyebrow before shrugging. "Fine, now let's go," he said as they both left their apartment and headed towards the academy. Their training over the 3 months had been fruitful for both. Karin had all but perfected her chakra exercises with the leaves and could hold all 10 leaves on her fingers tips for hours on end. Naruto could do the same but only with one hand. But he was pleased nonetheless. Their taijutsu had improved since they practiced a lot with Sasuke, and they did that over at the Uchiha compound since Sasuke's mom Mikoto seemed to enjoy teaching the trio a thing or two and would help them with their stances and how to make their punches stronger and crisper. Fugaku didn't seem to mind, though he did eye the two Uzumakis a little warily at times, as if he suspected them of something. Plus Asuma had even given them a few tips to help them with their element manipulation. He told them if they needed him, the best place to find him would be his home or the Dango restaurant where he would normally hang out with his fellow jonin and comrades. While they did attempt to go there once, they quickly fled when they saw some purple-haired lady who looked like she was in the middle of torturing some guy with a senbon in his mouth with a giant snake. They walked side by side, sticking close to each other, and Naruto simply ignored any glare he was being given. In fact, Karin had even began giving those that glared a glare right back at them since she knew Naruto would never do it. It only took them about a 20-minute walk before they arrived at the academy and walked into the halls of the academy. Naruto noticed that nothing had really changed all that much and everything looked relatively the same as it did before. The only thing different about would be those attending. "Ah, here we are," Karin said, pointing towards a sign that said 2B. They slid open the door and walked into the classroom that they would be attending for the next 4 years. First thing they noticed was that most were already here and Iruka was sitting at the front with another instructor. Naruto did not recognize him, but figured he must have just been new this year. "Good morning, Naruto, Karin," Iruka answered. "There are plenty of spaces, so feel free to take whichever seat you want." They both nodded and began looking around until they spotted Sasuke sitting by himself in the middle of the left side. Seeing the 2 empty seats by him, they went up the steps and took their seats by Sasuke, who smiled and gave them both a small wave before they fell into a comfortable silence. They both began looking around the room. They were both aware that a lot of the heirs from different clans were joining them this year and tried to pinpoint which they thought they were. It did not take them long to notice the first. He had choppy and spiky brown hair with black eyes and had red fang marks on his cheeks. He was playing with a small puppy in front of him. Both knew from the dog that he had 2 of been in Inuzuka, the clan that teamed up with dogs. Then there was another obvious one. He was a plump boy with red swirl patterns on his cheeks with auburn-colored hair and was eating a bag of chips. If they had to guess, he would have had 2 of been in Akimichi. There were a few others he was unsure of, but they both knew straight away when they spotted a girl in the top row that had dark blue hair and pale skin. Her eyes were completely white and they recognized it as the taijutsu known as the Byakugan, meaning the girl must have been a Hyuga. As they sat down and waited for the class to start, they heard the loud sound footsteps rushing towards the classroom that drew everyone's attention. It sounds like a stampede, they all thought, though Naruto and Karin both noticed Sasuke went a little pale. The door flung open and charging through was a horde of girls all wearing an assortment of kimonos. At the head of the group of girls were 2 in particular that were scowling at each other. One had bright pink hair with a red bow in it and was wearing a dark blue kimono. She had milky colored skin and had jade green eyes. The other had platinum blonde hair that went to her shoulders and was wearing a light pink kimono. She too had milky white skin but had pale pupil-less blue eyes. "I got here first," both yelled out before putting heads and starting some kind of argument. Everyone just stared at them in disbelief while a kid with pineapple-shaped hairstyle covered his ears, muttering something about girls being troublesome. Watching the girls bicker with each other, Iruka sighed before shouting with his big head, "Jutsu girls, shut up and take your seats." Being a little blown away, they all began looking around the room before all pairs of eyes zeroed in on Sasuke. "Sasuke-kun," they all shouted, making him groan. They were about to go over to him before noticing the seats beside him were already taken. All theirs then went to Naruto and Karin, who had raised eyebrows and began glaring at them. "Get out of those seats. We are sitting next to Sasuke-kun," the pink-haired girl shouted, causing a loud "yeah" to back her up. Everyone in the room began rubbing the inside of their ear. The girl's voice was way too high-pitched. No one said anything before Karin eyed the girl. "Shut the hell up, Pinky. There are plenty of seats around here. Or is your butt so fat it won't be able to fit? It caused the room to break into chuckles, while the pink-haired girl looked like she was about to explode. Though she looked like she was about to march over toward Karin, Haruka reminded them that there were other seats. The girls all scowled at the two Uzumakis who rolled their eyes at the great start to their first day. As the girls went to sit down, Naruto looked over to Sasuke. "What the hell was that about?" he whispered. Sasuke shrugged. "I don't know. A few weeks ago they just all started following me and kept asking for dates. I said no, but they would not leave me alone. I told my mom and she started laughing. I don't know what to do with them." Both nodded in sympathy. Haruka had warned them something like this might occur during the academy. Yep, Sasuke has a bad case of the fangirls, both thought before they paid attention to the front as Haruka began sounding off the register. "Okay, welcome to everyone. Before we begin I will call your name on the register. Just answer when your name is called." Shino Aburam, the boy sat at the back next to the Hyuga girl wearing the giant jacket answered a quiet here. Toji Akamichi, here, the boy with the chip said confirming Naruto's suspicions. The register continued for about a minute as Naruto and Karin watched and who answered when the names were called. The boy with the red marks on his face was an Inyazuka that was named Kiba and the girl at the back was a Hyuga like they expected called Hinata. The platinum blonde girl was Ino Yamanaka, the heiress of the Yamanaka clan. Though both Naruto and Karin both thought she seemed a little spoiled and bratty. The other girl was a civilian girl known as Sakura Haruno, but both recognized the last name. They believed her mother was on the civilian council, meaning the girl was no doubt from a wealthy civilian family. The lazy boy beside the Akamichi was revealed as Shikamaru Nara, the heir of the Nara clan, and from the looks of things he was just like all the others Naras Naruto was aware of. Lazy. Other than that everyone else was from civilian families. "Sasuke Uchiha," Haruka called out. "Dear sir," Sasuke said from his pot which resulted in most of the girls in the class to squeal. Sasuke just groaned in annoyance and rested his head on the table. "Karin Uzumaki," he said causing the Karin to respond back politely, though she earned a few glares from some of the other girls and some dreamy looks from some of the civilian boys that made Naruto form a tick mark on his head. "Naruto Uzumaki," he said. "Dear Haruka-sensei," Naruto answered though it caused a few people to break out and whispered mainly the civilian side. "It's that kid my mom told me to stay away from. I hear he is some kind of freak of nature." Naruto looked away, not allowing it to bother him, though Karin did glare at those that whispered and unintentionally released a little bit of killing intent that surprised Haruka and the other instructor. She quickly stopped and sat back around, but did link her hand with Naruto's underneath the desk, which Naruto smiled his thanks to her. "Okay, now that everyone is accounted for, first let me introduce myself. My name is Haruka Yamino, and I will be your shinobi teacher and instructor for the next 4 years. Next to me is my fellow instructor Mizuki Toji, who will be assisting me with teaching you all." The man next to him smiled politely and gave a small wave to everyone, though no one noticed the small glare he sent towards Naruto. "Okay everyone, so to begin with let me all ask you one simple question. What is a shinobi?" A lot of hands went in the air, though the one belonging to Sakura was the one that caught Haruka's attention due to all the flying around it did. "Yes Sakura," Haruka called making Sakura grin in victory at everyone, mainly Karin though she scowled at seeing Karin was not even looking at her. She was talking to Naruto and Sasuke and said something that made them both laugh. Sakura did not like that, but began to answer the question anyway. A shinobi is someone who trains to fight for and protect the village that they are born and raised in and are able to perform jutsu by using an energy called chakra, which is the mixture of both physical energy and spiritual energy. They do all kind of missions ranging from various levels and use a wide variety of tools and weapons. Yeah, that was very good," Haruka said looking at the girl. All he needed was a short answer, but he guessed that would suffice. Sakura grinned smugly to herself and looked over to Sasuke who she hoped had been watching but frowned when she saw he was talking to Karin again. "That was well put Sakura. A great answer, but now here is my next question. Can you all tell me what 3 things all shinobi need to have to be a great shinobi?" The 3 friends perked up at the question. They perked up because Mikoto had explained to them this very thing just a few days ago. She told them to be prepared of that question since they always ask it. Most answered that they needed jutsu or to be from a clan, but Haruka shot them down immediately. Though eventually he saw that Naruto, Karin and Sasuke all put their hands up at the same time. "Yes you 3, he asked as each began to give one of the answers. "The love for the village and willingness to protect it," Naruto answered. "Have a mind that will not yield and dedication to hard work," Karin then answered. "And finally a strong mind and body," Sasuke finished off. Haruka looked on impressed at the 3 as with some of the other kids, mainly the clan kids, since they began to remember their parents telling them something similar. Though if Naruto had to hazard a guess, the Nara boy Shikamaru already knew but was too lazy to answer. "Very good, perfect answer," he commended. "It looks like we have a pretty great batch this year, Mizuki," he said to his fellow instructor who nodded. "Yes, it certainly looks that way," Mizuki answered back, but inside was not happy that Naruto seemed to be rather intelligent and looked like he had friends. It made making the boy uncomfortable during the next 4 years more challenging. The next few hours were introducing the students to the academy and testing them on what they already knew. Just like Naruto had thought, the clan children were ahead by a lot when it came to clan techniques and history about the village, since they had their entire clan to help them and give them pointers. Though he began to see what all their personalities were like, as was Karin and Sasuke, simply by observing them in class. Hiba was hothead who acted like Naruto had before he got things together, Ino was self-obsessed, Choji was a glutton, Shikamaru was lazy, Hinata was shy, and Shino just kept to himself and answered when spoken to. When it came to seeing what everyone was like when it came to their kunai throwing, thanks to their practicing over the last 6 months, Naruto had scored 7 out of 10, while Karin had gotten 6 out of 10. Sasuke meanwhile got 8 out of 10, which earned a squeal from all the girls in the class other than Karin and Hinata. "How me do they ever shut up?" Naruto thought while Karin just shook her head. He was really glad Karin was not a fangirl, otherwise he doubted he would be able to bear listening to her rambling on about Sasuke like all the others girls. Then Iruka and Mizuki tested them on Taijutsu and had them spar against the instructors. Sasuke and Karin both sparred with Iruka and quickly showed they fairly proficient in it, more so than most due to having sparred almost every day when they trained. It impressed a lot of people, including some of the guys, as Kiba could be seen eyeing Karin as if he found something he approved of in her. Though they all admitted having to watch the fangirls attempt to fight in kimonos was very humorous since they could barely move and they kept falling over due to the clothing getting in the way. Iruka had quickly scolded them all for not wearing appropriate shinobi clothing and told them they had best wear more appropriately tomorrow. Naruto though struggled a little. Mainly because Mizuki was being way too rough and was easily fighting a level where Naruto could not quite keep up, and by the smirk on Mizuki's face, it made Naruto think that he was doing it on purpose. "Better luck next time, Naruto," Mizuki said with sweet voice, though Naruto could hear the hint of malice in it and walked back to the others. "Naruto, what was that? You are normally better than that," Karin asked with Sasuke listening in as well since he had the same thought. It was Mizuki-sensei. With everyone he just stood there and dodged and take hit with his palm, but with me he actually started fighting back and he was grinning the entire time. "You think he might have wanted to hurt you?" Karin seethed since she did not like to see one of their supposed instructors being different with Naruto while treated everyone else nicely. "I will be fine, Karin-chan. If anything more like that happens I can talk with Iruka-sensei. I am sure he will keep an eye on Mizuki." After the small testing spar session they went back into the classroom where Iruka and Mizuki continued on with their talk on what it means to be a shinobi and what the village will expect from them until the bell rang, signaling it was time for lunch to start. As everyone paired off and left to have their lunches, Sakura, Ino and the fangirls all made a beeline and shouted, "Sasuke, come have lunch with us." Though they all blinked when they saw Sasuke had already left and was long gone, fully intending to eat his lunch with his 2 friends. But the trio, Naruto, Sasuke and Karin, all sat in one of the far parts of the academy and sat underneath one of the big trees that decorated the place. Since it was a very warm day they thought it would be nice to enjoy their lunch under the shade of the tree. All 3 had a bento box in front of them, 2 which Karin had happily made for herself and Naruto, while Sasuke the one Makoto had made him. "Thanks for the lunch, Karin-chan," he said grinning as he was about to eat his rice with curry sauce with bits of chicken and beef mixed into it. "You're welcome. Just remember that it is your turn tomorrow," she said reminding him. As the 3 were about to begin eating they noticed that a little ways off the 2 they recognized as Hinata and Shino were sat together a little ways off. Naruto looked at his 2 friends who looked thoughtful for a moment before they both shrugged. Grinning, Naruto called out to them. "Hinata, Shino, come over and eat with us," he called out, waving his hand gaining their attention. They saw the 2 look at each other and noticed the girl go a little red before the 2 got up and joined them. Shino sat beside Sasuke while Hinata plopped down beside Karin. "Thank you for inviting us over, Uzumaki-san," Shino said in a very monotone voice. "Yes thank you," Hinata added as she poked her 2 index fingers together. The trio guessed she was a little shy. "That's okay. We wanted to make some more friends and we saw you both sitting on your own, so we thought we could get to each other better over lunch. Plus please just call me Naruto. My father did say to try and interact more with people and this would be a good chance to do so," Shino said. "And I shall, Naruto-san. Your dad is the head of the Aburam clan, right?" Karin asked as he nodded. "I think I have seen him around in the village. They are the clan that have jutsu skills and interact with insect, right?" Naruto asked with Shino nodding. "Yes, that is correct, though most tend to avoid us due to many disliking insect. It causes many to look down at us in odd ways," he said as some beetle crawled out of his jacket and on the edge of his fingertips for all to see. He was expecting everyone to freak out or run away, but instead he actually found his usual stoic self surprised when he saw everyone lean in, including Karin and Hinata, and looked at the beetles. They're so cool. And they have very pretty colors, Karin said as Hinata nodded from her spot. The beetles then flew up and landed on palm of Karin's hand as she looked at them carefully. You do not mind bugs? Shino asked, getting everyone heads shaking. I think they're pretty cool. You can learn a lot from insects, and some are even useful in healing methods like draining out poisons. They can be very useful if people actually gave them a chance. Everyone could see Shino's shoulders ease a little, no doubt he was somewhat relieved and happy that he was with people that looked past the insect and actually appreciated what his family did for a living. And you are from the Hyuga clan, right? Karin said to Hinata, who nodded. Other than Sasuke, I have never met someone from one of the top-tier prestigious clans in the Leaf, since the Hyuga are known all over the world for the Dijutsu. Yes, that's right. I am the current heiress of the clan and I live with my father and little sister. They all wondered where her mom was, but they felt it was best not to answer. So you two know each other outside of school? Both nodded. Our mothers would sometimes arrange play dates when we were younger. We have known each other since we were 4. Plus my father and Hinata's father were in the same class and Genin team together. So their friendship has carried. Would I presume it's the same with the three of you? Shino asked. Sasuke answered. Naruto and Karin lived together while I met them 3 months ago and trained with them when I could spare the time from the clan. Why you live together? Hinata asked the two. What about your parents? Are you two siblings? Oh no, we are not sibling, but we do come from the same clan. Both our parents are dead, so it's just us. But we live together since we are distantly related and to keep each other company. Plus Karin-chan is my best friend. The two nodded, though Shino picked up the clan part. You say you are part of a clan? He asked, getting a nod from the two. Our clan is the Uzumaki clan. But unfortunately, due to past events and the wars, we are the last two of our clan. The Uzumakis were wiped out and scattered across the land. There might be more out there, but we are the only two that we know of. Oh, I am sorry to hear that, Hinata said, but they both waved it off. It's fine, but it won't matter because one day we'll restore the Uzumaki clan and bring it back to greatness. That's our goal. An admirable goal, Shino added, with Hinata and Sasuke nodding as well. The trio, along with their two new friends, began talking about what sort of things they had been doing before they joined the academy and what they had planned for future training sessions outside the academy. From a distance, Sakura, Ino and the other fangirls were ranging at seeing Karin and Hinata with Sasuke. Those hussies are trying to put the moves on our Sasuke-kun, Sakura said as many of the others nodded. Let's go over there and teach them a lesson, many of them said and were agreeing. Sakura nodded. They looked like they were about to march over before the bell signaling lunch was over rang out. They panned back and they saw that already the group of 5 were making their way back inside. The girls fumed a little more before they huffed and began to walk back inside, glaring at Karin and Hinata from behind. End of the day. The rest of the time in the academy was the same as the morning. It was getting the new students used to the new curriculum and told them what they could expect to happen in the future and what they should set as their goals during the academy. Though Naruto had already heard in the year before, he listened intently again since he did not want to miss anything this time. Iruka was happy to see Naruto, and Karin had widened their friendship circle when he saw Hinata and Shino walking in with them. Though he did groan when the fangirls all came in and fought for seats to be near Sasuke. Though they tried to move Hinata and Shino, who sat behind the trio this time, and another verbal beating that Karin gave Sakura, they relented. Once the day had ended, Naruto, Karin, and Sasuke walked out together and waved goodbye to Hinata and Shino, who were collected by their parents. Shino looked just like his father, while Hinata's father was a stoic-looking man wearing formal white robes and long brown hair. Sasuke, a voice called before Sasuke felt himself being lifted up and snuggled into the chest of his mother. How was your first day? She asked. It was fine, Mom. Now please put me down, he grumbled, to which she did, though she never lost that playful smile on her face. She looked around and saw a lot of the girls look at Sasuke and was inwardly laughing. I hope all your girlfriends were not too rough on you today, she teased, making him blush. They're not my girlfriends, he said, making her laugh before she turned to Naruto and Karin. She smiled and pecked them both on the forehead, something she had begun to do every time she saw them. The two Uzumakis had quickly grown on her and invited them over a lot of the time to have dinner with them. Though they never saw Sasuke's older brother Itachi and they rarely saw Fugaku. So a lot of the time it was just the 4 of them, and Mikoto loved that Naruto and Karin enjoyed her cooking. Would you both be joining us tonight? She asked, but the two shook their heads. It's my turn to cook tonight, and I promised Naruto I would make him some ramen, she said as Naruto grinned and nodded. Very well, you just let me know when you want dinner round ours and you will be more than welcome to. Okay. Thanks, Mikoto-san, both said as they hugged the Uchiha matriarch, waved goodbye to Sasuke before they made their way home.